Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show tonight. Welcome, everybody. A slightly differently scheduled version of BNB, but we are here and there's a lot to talk about. Things are happening in the NFL, things are happening with the Seattle Seahawks, and we've got to talk about it. So I am joined, as I am every week, by Brandon of the Hawks Nest. How are you doing tonight, Brandon?
I'm doing great, doing great. Got shook a little bit by some kind of little cold this week, but bouncing back. Thanks for working with me on that, Brendan.
Okay, not a problem at all. It happens. It definitely happens. Fortunately for us, it seems like it doesn't happen that often, though. We grind through it.
No, that's right. Sometimes you got to push on through. I would have on Thursday. I almost got there, but just couldn't quite get over the top. It was a coaching decision, Brendan.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a game time decision. It was like right up to kickoff.
I tried to tape it up, man. It just it wouldn't loosen up.
Okay, so there's a purpose to this show tonight. We want to talk about the combine that just happened last week. We learned a lot of interesting things. There's definitely a lot of light that has been shed on this draft class, I think. But before we get there, there are some things that I think need to be covered as it regards to the Seahawks, because the Seahawks have been making moves. They're doing stuff. They're making some waves here, and most of it is as expected, but some of it kind of isn't. So let's just go one by one here. Let's start with the first of 4 releases over the last week or so. 4 players were released. Let's start with the first one, Jamal Adams. Obviously, we all knew we were going to release him. It was very obvious. The interesting thing here is that they chose to do a regular release. They did not do post June 1st. They just took on all the dead money now. So what do you think about that?
I think specifically in regards to the choosing of the release aspect of it, I think that definitely would seem to indicate in the surface of this before the other moves, Brendan, that the team was looking to sort of do the reset button fully this year, in a way to where we're going to maybe have to take a bit more pain this year than we will the next year, first trying to spread out for better maximizing the dollar to this year. This is at least what it initially looked like. I don't know now that we've had so many of these other releases if it was exactly that is what was it the point of this. I do think, though, above all else, it was the protection of the 2025 cap situation. You were sitting in a place that was in a less, especially after all these releases, Brendan, in a less really overall healthy state to next year's cap, a time where you very well likely will wanting to be putting the pedal to the metal and try to see if you can truly get out there and be in that contender, and not just a contender if everything works out, but that you could be a strong, like we've assembled our great team to be a true contending type team. So you would set the stage for that better by getting that cap situation into a better place. And this certainly does that.
Right. And that's what a lot of people have had to say about the move. A lot of people say that they like it. And I will say this. The Seahawks are not really going to be going for a Super Bowl this year, at least not any more than any team does in any year, right? We have a brand new head coach, brand new offensive coordinator, brand new defensive coordinator, brand new offensive line coach. This is not the year to go all in super aggressively. This is not the year to go crazy with stuff. So I understand the idea of taking on all the Jamal Adams dead money now. What I would say, though, is because you have cap space rollover, you could have done post June 1st and then made the determination later on whether or not you wanted to roll that money over. So you still could have done that with a post June 1st cut. Because remember, that entire cap hit that you would have saved at post June 1st, which is like 16.5 million, that gets taken up by your draft class and your practice squad and your injury buffer. So it's not like that money not becoming available to you until after June 1st is a problem. So I don't know. I feel like that way you get to kind of have it both ways. This way you only get to have it one way.
I think that that's a good point. I think that there is a place to be said, though, about trying to plan things out, and that the power of a plan versus the power of being reactionary. And while flexibility is nice, it's also kind of nice sometimes to put yourself in constraints of saying, here's the money we've got to spend. Here's the place we've got to be in at with it. And when I look at the Seahawks cap situation the past couple of years, Brendan, I do see a little bit of some grounds of times where there's a lot of dead money in there, a lot of dead money every single year you're peeling through. And I know this is a common thing in the NFL, but it seems like it's especially been a bit more on the backs of the Hawks as of recent. And so that being the case, I think him drawing down a little bit of that and going, okay, let's not just keep spreading this year after year. Let's not keep starting our position right now to putting dead money out tomorrow. Let's start to try to, for this new coaching staff, take this down to a clean, sterilized position and then push on from there.
Right. And with the news that we got earlier today, we now know that there will not be any post June 1st releases for the Seahawks because there's nobody left who is even eligible, because to be eligible, you have to have 2 or more years left on their deal. So at this point, they're just going to completely try to clean those 2025 books. There's going to be no dead money beyond whatever we choose to take on next offseason. And I mean, there's certainly nothing wrong with that. The other angle that I kind of kept coming back to was it's like inflation, because the cap keeps going up. So that's another reason to do post June 1st stuff, because the cap dollars later are worth less than the cap dollars now because the cap keeps climbing. So I know it's not a big difference. Like in value, it might be like $1 million additional, but that is another thing that was kind of occurring to me when I was looking into this stuff.
Yeah, I think that if all things being equal, you want to take a little bit more of that path to do that as you can. But if you do take it over to a little bit of an extreme degree, which would just be my point on that, is I think it was pushed a little bit at times to that extreme point, right? Taking that as the true and then pushing it a little farther than like, okay, you guys are pushing a little too much cap to this year's year there versus what you have in savings or flexibility moving into next year or the years beyond. So I think that there's a lot, to it in that. They've taken themselves, Brendan, from 28th in cap space before this all started from 2025, where they were sitting in their position of it. They're now to 18th. So to me, I like the ability of coming into next year. We've got this year still to, as we see right now with how much cap space we're sitting on, plenty of cap space to go out there and make many moves right now to even still be that contender if things work out great. But then you have really set the stage now, in my opinion, to be able to properly go into next year and say, hey, we can create a lot of cap space, maximize this for McDonald's, get those final couple of pieces we may need, and let's go at that time. And that, as you said at the top of this, not likely that you're going to go out to the Super Bowl this year, but into year 2, if things are clicking and things are rolling, yeah, there certainly is that potential, especially with where the talent of this team's at in their sort of, not projection, but in their sort of continual growth. You're muted.
Sorry about that. So at the end of the day, Jamal Adams released. Obviously a pretty significant mistake made, but you learn your lesson from it. Hopefully you learn the right lessons from it and you move on to the next one. So at the end of the day, I think that both ways of doing it were pretty close to each other in terms of goodness. The important part was that you move on.
Yeah. And you weren't trying to take a risk with Jamal moving forward and anything else, or that, hey, we got the draft picks into this. It's that sunk cost fallacy thing. Either is at a spot of right now that this is going to work going into the future, it's not. And what you've done prior to this has nothing to do with your assessment of the here and now and your projection of where the player is going down the road.
Right. All right. So shortly after Jamal Adams, we got word about his buddy in the backfield, his fellow safety, Quandre Diggs, released, freeing up about $11 million in cap space for the 2024 season. And he only had 1 year left on his deal, so that's all there is to it. There's no 2025 hit. There's no post June 1st with him. So we both kind of expected this and wanted this. So any final words on the Quandre Diggs era?
I think there's so many lessons between Adams and Quandre Diggs that we could do a whole show. I did a whole show around just the Adams lessons you could learn. I think you could throw Quandre in there too a couple of days ago, Brendan. And I think we could almost do just a couple hours on this. Really, you could. But to me, there's a couple of things that come down to this that is just sort of the bottom line. The safety position is devalued for a reason. It's not like, well, it's just, they can't get the love. There's a reason, number one. Number two, I think both these safeties got paid at a time as the NFL has making a hard transition. I mean, Brendan, I'm talking like a solid left turn about 4 years ago with the Fangio defense taking over. And that is the requirement for the split safety. No longer is it a nice thing to have. And these two guys were guys that were very specific. I know Quandre's got the background of slot to strong to free, right? But he's a free and Jamal's a strong. And we're moving into an era where those terms need to be a little bit more ubiquitous between a player. You're not just one or the other. You need to be both. I'm looking at these guys coming out of college now, Brennan, and you look at the snap counts off of PFF and where they're rolling, and it's 300 to the strong safety, 200 to the free, 100 snaps out there at the slot. They're being asked at the college level to do many, many, many more things than they've been asked to do prior at the pro level. And this means this is where it's going to be. If not, it's already been heading in this direction. And these guys being paid what they can to be in a specialized place on the football field. And in Quandary's case, doesn't make him a bad player. It just means that you to play to that specific role versus the roles are now being asked for. They're not going to pay for that if they're only getting half of what they look at it as what they need from the position.
Right. I do think that there may be a team out there that Diggs can go to and still look pretty good. There may be.
Absolutely.
But not in this. I think that some people kind of have lost track of that, because I know there were some people who were unhappy about this release. In this Mike Macdonald defense, it's not going to work. It's not going to work the way that it did in Pete's original cover 3.
This is nothing to do with Quandary Diggs in diminishing skill set and that he just can't play anymore. To your point, this is everything to do with Mike Donald and what the requirement is of the safeties. And it's just to what I just talked about there. You have to have a safety that can come, free safety that can come down in the box and tackle effectively. Not come down and hang on for near life, not to be undersized and ran over if it's too big of a back out there that he's got to go up and tackle, but a guy that can go up and literally take those guys down. And it's a hard skill set to find, but it's becoming more common coming out of college. And so if you're more specialized at the NFL level right now with those guys coming out, you got to either have to grow your skill set or like Jamal or like Quandary said on Twitter, I got to go become a defensive back again. Maybe that's the value point to be had there at that point.
Yeah, there's a team out there somewhere where you won't notice Quandary Diggs missing tackles because the ball carrier doesn't get up to him very much.
Right.
It's just, but that place is not here.
No,
not anymore.
No, definitely. There's still other defenses that still roll a little more traditionally in the roles and would put him in a good spot and he'd be fine back there. So I still think he's going to find a starting role. And if he's, hopefully it works out great with him, he can find a contender. I was thinking maybe going back to Detroit for him or something like that would be a good little landing zone for him, maybe possibly.
I could dig it. All right. Next release, and this one was a little bit surprising to you, and it was also a little surprising to me. I'm not against it. I don't dislike it at all, but I was a little bit surprised they pulled the trigger on Will Dissly. Will Dissly released, saving $7 million. Whoa, how do you feel?
Like you said, it was the only one of these real releases that has been a little bit disappointing to me. I'm not going to cry in my pillow, angry about it. It's just one where you go, okay. The market right now for tight ends in free agency is not terribly deep. The draft right now for tight ends is not terribly deep. We've now taken ourselves down to 3 straight tight ends that you need across the board. And I don't know, maybe the team's just going all wide receiver, Brendan, with some of these recent restructure moves and stuff, that's going on as well. But it's a little bit puzzling because now you need 3 unless you're just rocking 2 going forward. And maybe that's what they're going to do is keep an extra receiver and roll with 2 tight ends, and it'll be just a bunch of that. But it does appear that the blocking tight end and the value of that has been a reduced spot in the NFL right now, Brendan. I was listening to Behind the Sticks podcast talking about this last night, being that that guy has just kind of been segmented out of the offense a little bit now, versus you needing to usually have that back in the day. A lot of teams doing the 6th offensive lineman, for instance, Brendan, that being the role, just screw the extra tight end. We'll just keep the 6th offensive lineman because then at least we have an extra tackle on the roster. And I think it's a good point. And maybe this is a little bit of an outcropping of that because that was really where Will's value would come into play, is that he's such a competent blocker all the way around, pass protection, run blocking. But as we've seen here, it does look like John Schneider's looking at that big red reset button as far as this cap's concerned. And he's like, anything with even somewhat bad money on the books, boom,
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. I don't mind it quite so much because I do think there was some concern about him physically breaking down. I know it hadn't happened yet. I know that it was a projection, but I feel like all the injuries have probably taken a toll on him to where I don't know if he can play 40 snaps a game. So I don't mind it. I did think we were going to be kind of forced to stick with him because of the fact that we don't have tight ends, but let me walk you through this hypothetical scenario here. So Will Dissly, you cut him, you save $7 million. You bring back Colby Parkinson on some kind of a deal. First year cap hit is like, let's say $3 million. You bring back Will Dissly, who maybe shops himself around in free agency, finds there's not really much out there, comes back to Seattle. It's where he spent most of his life, and says, okay, I'll come back on a reduced rate. I'll come back for a deal that maybe that first year cap hits like $3 million. And then you draft a rookie in late day 2 or early day 3, maybe somebody like what's the Kansas State guy, Ben Sinote, somebody like that. First year cap hit $1 million. You just took the Disley savings and converted it into a whole new tight end room. How would you feel about that if that's the way we play this?
Well, if you're lowering that cap hit down for Parkinson, you have given him a pretty substantial contract extension. And I don't know if I would be there with that. Parkinson gives you some upside as a pass catcher, but his reputation seems to have outpaced his performance on the field, in my opinion. When you look at what he is as a blocker, it was good last year through some parts. It was more on the downward side this year overall. The effort's there, but he was getting thrown around a little bit at times. And so when I talk about you're going to be paying $5-6 million a year in projections there for Parkinson, even if that's on a 3-4 year deal and you take it down to first couple million, well, that's still, now I'm on the hook for him for a couple of years. And for a guy that may not be able to really block from the position, and he's okay as a pass catcher. I don't think that he's super dynamic. He's had some good moments, but I don't think he's consistently shown you that he is some kind of guy that needs to be paid that kind of money versus, trying to go, I think, a much cheaper route at that point for that level of performance. I guess that's my bottom line. There's guys I feel like if that's what their skill set is to provide, to be patch catching tight ends, I can find cheap ones of that in the free agency period. I don't have to pay multi-year deal at $6 million. I like where you're coming from. I'm not against that. I'm not going to scream at it if they do it, Brendan. I'm not going to be mad at it if they do it. But the Parkinson thing and giving him an extension, he's a little bit to me of the definition of the fan base falling in love with their own player a little too much.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. We do that. Like I remember it with Freddie Swain a little bit. People for some reason liked Freddie Swain. He had a cool nickname, kind of, I guess. I don't know what it was. But if it's not Colby Parkinson, then it's somebody else in that range. The point, what I'm trying to say is, I think there's a scenario where you can build your whole tight end room with the $7 million you saved on the Disley cut.
Sure.
And that could include bringing back Disley. What if he goes around and he's like, hey, nobody really wants me. I've had too many injuries. I'm not athletic enough. I'll go back to Seattle on like a 1 year, $2 million deal. I'll do, a little bit more than the veteran minimum. Maybe I'll do 2 years for $4.5 million. Like these guys fall through the cracks sometimes. And then they're just like, where'd all the money go?
Well, we're seeing positions that are being devalued, to your point, as devalued as ever. I would be a little skeptical that it's just going to be a couple million for Will out there on the open market, unless the injury thing, to your point, really carries the weight we're talking about. Because when I look at the skill set Will Disley brings, I don't see a lot of free agents on the open market that bring that same kind of skill set. So, and I don't know how much the injury thing is going to really factor in for a guy that's missed 2 games in the last 4 years. I think that's not going to, maybe the medicals, they do the checkout in the MRI and they're like, oh, that knee's done. That could definitely happen. But if the medical's clear, I don't think he's vet minimum. I think with his skill set, he'll make $4 million a year on a multi-year deal. And that's okay. Again, I'm not it's not a huge deal to lose him, because I understand at this point when you're turning things over, it's turning things over. And sometimes you're going to give up even good things that are even still in working in good order, because you're trying to just get things to a real 0-hour level for your new coach so that he can set the stage absolutely the way that he sees fit and your general manager sees fit. And I get that.
Right. So those were the 3 big ones. They all happened basically at the exact same time. A couple days later, we got another release, the final release so far. Brian Monet hits the bricks, frees up $5.4 million. There really isn't much to say here. There was a little bit of drama, right? Because I remember the morning before he was released, there were people in my Discord wondering why hasn't he been released yet? And some people were like, do you guys think he's still failing the physical and we can't cut him yet because of that? And people were like, oh no. Is he just going to sit on that torn ACL for the rest of the year? But shortly after, we let him go. So I guess he's okay.
Maybe it healed up in another day or something, or they slipped him an extra $100,000 and they're like, just let it be healed so we can get this done. Thank goodness. It was a contract that was a strange one that was given out at the time. One of the few deals I've seen Schneider give out in his entire 14-year period that was about getting up ahead of a player's value. Every contract down the line on every player had to earn his way through, even through the Legion of Boom era. But Brian Monet gave you very little production for the contract extension he got a couple of years ago. It was an odd deal, especially for a general manager who so thoroughly has made it a sort of forefront thing that he wants to be out there and show people that getting the nose tackle is not really that important to me, man. It's odd that you make that kind of move, yet your mentality is this way so often towards the position. But again, it's a good one. There's no problem with this one whatsoever. It's nothing but a good move, Brendan. And this was smart to move on. Again, another one of those sunk cost things. You can't hope, well, he bounces back and then maybe no, he's never been that guy. He's never heard the money. He's been paid. Keep it moving.
You can find guys like this for the veteran minimum easily.
Yeah.
And going back to the initial extension, I remember reading about this a little bit at the time, and I guess there was some kind of thing where I remember, because we had the option to tender him at the minimum. We had like an ERFA tag we could have used on him, and we didn't. We decided to extend him, and apparently it was because we felt bad for him, because the only reason why the tender was still active on him was because he kept getting hurt. So we extended him because we felt like it was doing right by him. And then for some reason you give a pure run stuffer more than like $2 million a year. Like why should a guy like this ever make more than even $1.5 million a year? These guys are going extinct. These guys are lucky if they can find a job, even if they're good. And Monet only ever flashed a little bit here and there. It was very weird what we decided to do there.
Yeah, I'm not, and it's outside of John's. I'm looking at our history. I can't think of another situation where we've ever done anything like that before. So very strange. I don't know if they were just super hyped Brendan on his upside and they saw him in practice just beasting on people, but the goods weren't there for what you were paying for.
Yeah, maybe it was a thing where we were kind of switching to the new defense, the Fangio defense, and we wanted a big nose tackle, and those guys are kind of becoming rare, but you still didn't need to go to that extent to keep him. I think he would have taken a lot less than that.
Oh, and use your RFAs. I mean, the point of having, I understand there's rare moments where a guy in 3 years of playing has outperformed his deal and you need to pay him, and you do so for guys that are like your DK Metcalf type guys. But if it's a guy that's been injured or banged around or has given you middling play, then sorry, you're playing through the RFA. I mean, that's the nature of the beast here. We have to balance our roster with guys we pay, and we have to balance it with cheap guys on rookie deals. And if you're on your rookie deal, is what it is. You can't have that kind of bleeding heart in the sport because you'll eat your cap up right quick.
Right. Exactly. And I'm glad we were able to move off of it. It would have been awful if we had to sit on that all year because he wasn't over his torn ACL yet. So
Amen.
So we had two more things happen earlier today. So Seahawks were not done after that. John Schneider did say that he hopes that he's done with releasing players. Didn't say that he was, but he did say he hopes.
He's almost got through everybody, hasn't he? Just about, he's got like one left.
Yeah, Ballor's the only one potentially left, and I would like to see him released, if only because I think you could bring him back for way less. But
yeah. He's on that. It's tough. He's 35. He's on that high vet minimum at this point.
Yeah, I know. But like nobody's gonna pick that guy up. He's a 35-year-old special teamer.
I know, but you release him. What's his cost here? $3 million. So you release him, you eat $1 million. Then you sign up for the vet minimum at 2.1. So your $3 million costs.
I did the math on this. I think that if you release him and bring him back on the veteran minimum, you save like 1.6, which doesn't sound that great. But you could also, because he's making $4 million against the cap this year, and it's like 1.4. I think it's like 1.2 or 1.4 dead if he's released. So you can release him, save 2.6, bring him back for like 1.3. And it's somewhere around there. Or you could just get younger at the position. It's, special teamers a young man's game.
Yeah, because he carries the over $1 million dead money. That's the tough part there. So it takes it to 3, right? You save 3, little under 3 if you release him. But then you've got the $2.1 million cap hit on top of that. So it comes down to less than the 3. It's 900,000, 800,000 that you'd save by doing it. So, it's 800,000, but it's also like probably at such a close cost that Schneider's just like, whatever, unless he's just fully ready to release him and, move on.
To me, he's more than anything a guy who's here for Monday through Saturday, not for Sunday. Like he's a locker room guy, he's a culture guy, he's a Pete guy, and that's great and all, but we're flipping the table over a little bit here, and I don't know if I need to be keeping something like that around.
I'm at a point. You got Jamal, Quandre, Will, Brian Monet. You even restructured, which we'll talk about. Second Eskridge. If we are leaving with the one bad money on the books that we're left with, which is Belore at that point, I can handle that. That versus some of the other bad money we've had in recent years that have been sitting on the books walking into the season where you're like, oh Lord, we're paying this. I think it's in a better spot. So I'll be okay with that's our only bad one on there. And hey, his contract's done after this year, so it's not like he's long on the hook.
All right. So the first move today concerned D. Eskridge. It was not the move that most people thought we were going to make with him, I think.
Yeah.
We were all waiting for the D. Eskridge notification on our phones, and we got one, but it was a little bit different. He is not released. He restructured. And restructuring basically means pay cut, as near as I can tell. I looked into this. Basically, he gave back about $415,000. And nothing else changes. He doesn't get more guaranteed. He doesn't get more next year. It basically just takes his salary down to the minimum that it can be. And he still has to try to make the team in July and August. So this move, what it amounts to is we save about $415,000 and we give up nothing in return. So you can't be upset about it. But do you find it interesting that we're keeping this guy around for at least a little bit longer?
John seems pretty enamored by him. And I think that he had a really great training camp and mini camp last year where he was like just the speed and all that was something that people felt like they could really feel from him. I think that even with this, his pathway to making the roster is going to be a very tough one, Brendan, because it's a stacked receiving core. I think that even if they take a receiver late in this draft, you can end up pulling in a very talented kid that's going to be able to push him in a major way, especially if he's not able to stay healthy. And that's the bottom line here with it is that pay cut or not, coming into this mini camp and all that, it's like one injury. And I think it's probably all she done with him as far as the team, especially now that they've gotten the contract in a right workable spot to where they can do that. So he's on his final life as a cat right now. He's got 8 ones that he's used up and there's one left. And he's a very talented kid as far as his athleticism, speed, quickness, burst. There's a reason he was a second round pick on that. He's got some holes in his game too, but he's a unique guy in this offense right now. If he can get it to work, Brendan, we're with Lockett coming back, which I'm going to talk about in a second, but DK, Lockett, Bobo, they're not really yak guys. JSN, not really a yak guy. He's an okay yak guy. I mean, that's not his bread and butter really. And so you do have a guy in Eskridge where yak is what he is going to bring to the play if you can get him to, work right, but it's all about health.
Right. And as you can see on screen here, there are some people in the crowd who are not terribly happy about this decision either. Well, here's what I'm going to say though. So at this point, Eskridge counts for like it basically counts for like 1.1 million against the cap, I think, because of this pay cut. Mm-hmm. Right. And if you release him and you go get another receiver, that receiver is going to cost about that much. So you're not really saving money on the Eskridge release. The Eskridge release was basically just to get a guy with more potential on the roster. And I will admit, as much as we all don't like Eskridge around here, there is some stuff that he can do that you're not going to just find anywhere, right? There's some stuff that he can do that is unique, is special. And maybe the plan is just, look, he's going to be the return guy. He's just going to return kicks and punts, and he's going to do that. And we're going to ride him until somebody hits his head and concusses him, like what happens to pretty much every return man these days. So, I mean, you'd have to spend that money plus probably a little bit more to get another returner, admittedly.
Or it's just to think of it even in these terms of you have him right now on the roster until you might find something better. Maybe that's a value-based free agent that suddenly comes along that you really like, who you didn't think you were going to get at such a cheap cost. Or maybe perhaps that's in the draft, a receiver at a value spot in a round of 4. You suddenly are like, holy hell, this is a guy we got almost a sub first round grade on. Let's take him. And then in tandem with that, after the draft, you will see this happens to a lot of players after the draft, where there'll be a number of releases that occur where you're sort of holding on to the guy until you're sure you're ready to let him go because you got something in the house. And if you don't, then you've got an insurance policy there. It's part of what helps you going into the draft to keep you in a position of drafting for value, Brendan, by setting the stage in your roster to be able to have your positions fairly well filled out to a decent level. Not that they can't be improved upon, but that then you don't feel pulled to that need category of things, right? Where you're trying to grab stuff. Well, we cut D, so we're missing D, and then we got just Bobo and Derek. So maybe there is a pull here in the 4th or 5th. We got to go get that wide receiver now. I think you want to stay more in that value place.
Right. And to keep in mind here, nothing has changed regarding releasing him. We can still do it. The dead cap hit on a release has stayed exactly the same. So we could cut him tomorrow, and it's like the restructure never happened. He shows up in training camp and drops a couple passes. You're gone. No reason to keep him around. He shows up in training camp and he's out of shape and he's not running so fast. You're gone. He gets in a domestic violence situation again. Gone. Any of that stuff. So nothing's really changed, except in the event that we do keep him around, there's a little bit less to pay. Now, you're not going to do much with $415,000 right now in the NFL, but it adds up.
It's good. It's a good deal. Like I said, I don't think there's no risk. It's low cost, high reward, and insurance policy and all that stuff. So it's really not a bad deal here to do this. And I'm right there with you, Snail, as far as being an anti D guy for what I've seen from him. Because even with what he does bring to the table, even when he's healthy, there's some skill set problems, I think, in his play. I don't think he's the best route runner. I don't think he's got the best hands, but he does have a component he can provide. And there was a reason he was drafted where he was drafted from that physical skill set, but it's just all about health with him. That's where it begins and kind of where it even ends at this point. Can you just stay healthy?
Right. So that was that. Also, we got this from Mumbles. Thank you for the $5. Cut after Eskridge gets hurt again, B. So mid-season. Also, you ever just forget a question you really wanted to ask? I mean, all the time.
Well, I would just ask, when has Eskridge ever made it to mid-season unhurt? So last year he got hurt, Mumbles, on the very first play of the very first kickoff of the preseason game. So, if he gets hurt again, I think that he's going to, even if he doesn't get hurt, let's just take hurt out of the game. If you have a receiver who comes out who's a 5th round guy, 6th round guy, 7th round guy, and he's blowing it up, or he's doing really well with Bobo and everybody's looking good, he's going to have a hard time making the roster if that occurs. Just remove the injury side, because you might have cheap club control on a back end rounded guy or an undrafted rookie free agent for 3 years, or you got 1 more year left of Eskridge. That's the other part of that too. So this is really not about Eskridge having much of a lock on the roster. If anything, it's less of a lock on the roster. It was John saying, okay, look, we kind of like you right now, but look, we've held on. You haven't done nothing for us. You can come back, and we want to keep this open to be able to cut you at any time, but you're at least still on an NFL roster. Your career's still going. You're in a comfortable place that knows and cares for you and understands you. And here's our envisioning role for you. And that's what we're going to do. Take it or leave it. And I think it's more of that kind of tone that was probably taken with Eskridge than, let's give you a soft pillow landing here.
Yeah, I kind of feel like the $415,000 was like the price he had to pay to stay on the team.
Yeah.
Like he had to give that back in order to stick around. It was either that or we're just going to cut you now.
Right. Agreed. I think the same way.
Yeah. And Mumbles does follow up with his member message. Sorry, meant week 2. Apologies for the typo. So that's a little more reasonable.
Okay. You're back in realism road. I was like, mid-season Eskridge. That's like we better give him an Iron Man award after that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. One more move. It happened like literally an hour before we went live. Reported from multiple sources, Tyler Lockett has restructured his contract. And once again, I must say that restructuring is just another phrase that we're using in this circumstance for pay cut, because it sure looks like he just decided to give some money back so that he could stick around. We don't know all the details yet, but experts in the field have said that Lockett's cap hit for 2024 is now somewhere around 14 million. Previously, it was 27 million.
Mm.
And it is believed, although we don't know for sure yet, that his 2025 situation has not changed. So if that's true, he basically just gave $13 million back because he wants to stick around. So, I mean, there's nothing to say here, but good news, right? For us.
Excellent news. I think, does it add a year on the end of the deal, though? Is that what it does? Is it throws it, or I think it tosses
That
it?
we don't know yet. Some people have speculated there could be a void year of some kind, but as of right now, it looks like it's still the same 2-year deal it was before, just with less money.
Yeah, well, it's hard to be mad at this at all. The restructure is really nice. I've been a guy that said that I think that Tyler Lockett is still helping you and still being a prominent part of doing good stuff for this team. Is he at the level he once was? Maybe not, but is he in a place where he's still being very consistent? And he's a guy that, with Geno, especially going back next year, those guys have good chemistry on third down. And when Geno needs a throw, security blanket wise, he'll go to Tyler. I can't, be mad at this deal at all, and lowering down the cap hit, maximizing this cap hit for this year, even all that much more, Brendan, gets you very excited. And of course, dreamy eyes a little bit starry eyes a little bit when it comes to this free agent period coming up, because you go, geez, you can just start to add that much more. Maybe we can take some big swings here, or maybe we substantially are going to make some moves. Maybe they're just looking to have this much money, and a lot of it will get rolled over into next year when when it's all said and done. But they've got a lot of flexibility to go a variety of different directions here with this coming offseason.
Right. And as far as I know, again, we don't know exactly how the contract plays out. It could be a straight restructure, which that would make 2025 rough. Don't get me wrong. That would make the 2025 cap hit like 40 million. But as near as I can tell, based on all the information we have so far, he just decided, I'll give back 13 million because I don't want to be let go. I don't want to go to a new team, learn a new scheme, learn a new offense, learn how to play with a new quarterback. I want to be here. And that's nice to see, right? That's something you're seeing less and less these days.
We don't see it very often, Brendan, but it doesn't mean that there isn't some value to it, to a team that uses it in the right way. Larry Fitzgerald had a little bit of this at the end of his career where, look, he wasn't the same Larry Fitzgerald. He had lost some speed, but the Cardinals still found ways to get him into the offense at times to where he was helping that offense and they could still rely on him at times. They just weren't leaning on him like once, you could. And I think you can take a similar trek with Tyler, and how nice for us here in Seattle with a lot of guys that, left out their career and didn't finish through, that we've got a guy that looks like he is going to finish his career through here on this. That's the other thing I think that we should take away. Maybe that's the burying the lead here, Brendan, is that this guarantees that Tyler Lockett, I think, he will be a Seattle Seahawk for life at this point. That he's not going to be a guy playing in another uniform, which is very, very cool.
Yeah, this could be his last year. 2024, he might call it good at that point. That's 10 seasons. We've speculated for a while that he might not be a guy that wants to play like 15, 16 seasons or anything crazy like that. Mm-hmm. Like this could be it. And he's still got the ability to have some really good seasons in this league. I don't know if he'll ever get back to 1,000 yards in a normal offense, but he is helping you more than he's hurting you. That's my whole thing, which is why I personally was willing to keep him on that cap hit that it originally was, almost 27.
Me too. Yeah, mm-hmm. I agree.
This all the better. This is all the better.
Yeah, this is even better. And I think, he's been a good player, Brendan. I think he's a guy that will still bring value to this team. Maybe not 1,000, but again, that's a bit of the view I think we've got to start having too, Brendan, with this 17-game season, which might now soon be turning to 18 games. Is it takes a village a little bit more, right? It's not as much about like, do you have your triplets? No, it's more about, do you have the culmination of an offense? A lot of guys that get their touches over the course of a year to be productive throughout, to be high scoring throughout. And that's going to take a variety of guys, not just I got this guy and I got that guy and we're good. No, that was a bit of the old thinking, I think, with that.
Right. And that's about it. That restructure, by the way, pushed the Seahawks to about, it's estimated, 55.6 million in cap space. Mm-hmm. Now you got to earmark about 10 for your rookies. You got to earmark about 3 for your practice squad, and then maybe another 3 for injury buffer going into the season. That gets you down to like 39, but that should be enough to take care of business this offseason.
There's a lot you get as an opportunity to go out there and make moves with on this. And Like I said, they may just do it to where they create this space, and then some of it's to roll into next year, or it's just to get the lay of the land, and they're looking to make some monster moves out there. I mean, I'm not sure at this point. I'm still kind of getting a read on that myself, Brendan. Maybe where you stand on it, but I I I think at the end of the day, it's just get the bad money off the books, and then let's survey the field from there. But it's going to be interesting to see what their plan is on Monday with this, if they are going to dip harder, or if they're just kind of sitting and waiting on that.
Yeah, I kind of feel like this is a proof of concept year. It's not a go for it year. It's not a throwaway year. It's like, okay, let's figure out if what we have works on a fundamental level, kind of like 2012 was, because the Seahawks didn't go for it in the 2012 offseason. No, they still needed to see, okay, is this Russell Wilson guy going to be any good? Is Matt Flynn going to be any good? Does this stuff work? And then once they found out in 2012 that it did work, it worked really well. They were like, okay, Percy Harvin trade, Cliff Averill signing, Michael Bennett signing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Then they went for it, but they had to walk before they could run. I feel like that's what they're going to do this year. See if they can walk first.
I mean, they did make some pretty monster free agent signings at that time, though. Remember, they did the Robert Gallery signing. They did the Sidney Rice signing.
Yes,
They
Rice.
did the Zach Miller signing. These were all top of the market moves at the time. Matt Flynn on the $24 million deal they threw at him as well, in addition to it. I mean, they were
Well, they
pretty.
needed a quarterback.
They did. No, they did. But they were, my point being, they were, that what I'm just saying is maybe there's a little bit of indication he might be willing to spend a little more earlier than we think on that, being that was a lead show on that last team. You know, you can make the argument, well, the Gallery thing wasn't the greatest. The Zach Miller trade worked out great for him. But those were bigger deals. The Rice, remember with the Bennett and the Averill thing, that was at the end of free agency. It was a strike year. Nobody had any cap or was going to spend cap because they were worried about where the cap was going. And so Averill and Bennett got lost out in the, they had to sign a 1-year deal for small money for how good of players they were.
Oh, absolutely.
But those other deals were huge. I mean, for the Raymond Jones just broke Sidney Rice's free agent contract record. That's how long that thing stood.
Yeah, and those deals were definitely notable, but they were 6-year deals, I think. I think both Miller and Rice were 6-year deals, if I'm remembering correctly. So they were also thinking about those as long-term deals, not just a let's go for it now. That was we're planning on being good at some point in the next half decade.
Yeah.
I think, because you can't tell me they were going all in with Tavares Jackson at quarterback. No way.
Well, no, but they're willing to spend before they got to that place, is my point on it. So when we come to this free agency and what they're willing to do, and just maybe a little spend, maybe a wait, maybe there's a little bit more willing to be active on this and go a little bigger than we're thinking on this, as a much more of I haven't thought of as much of a possibility moving into this period. I thought, okay, they will be in the place you're talking about, being a little more conservative in their approach. But because they took that track before where you can put a 6-year deal together, even back then, 4 years of the bonus money bled out. So adding 6 years didn't take the bonus money and spread it. You're still on the hook for that. And I will guarantee if we go back and look at those Gallery contracts, Sidney Rice contracts, it wasn't like they were putting the base at $1 million in those deals. Those 6-year contracts at the time would have been for the agents and for their reputation as much as for what the team was going to be costed by it or helped by it. Because adding the 6 years doesn't do for anything for you on the bonus side of it. Unless you're drawing down the base super, super low, it doesn't really have any kind of effect with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to be relatively active in free agency. I just don't think – I think it's going to be more like the Jadeveon Clowneys, maybe the Justin Simmons, maybe the I don't know, what's a tier 3 linebacker, like Josie Jewell. I don't think it's going to be like Chris Jones or Xavier McKinney or Robert Hunt. I think it's going to be more like, okay, we're going to give you enough to win with and see how it goes, but we're not going to commit to anything super long term. Like I think signing Chris Jones this offseason would be a little bit of a mistake potentially, because he might only have a couple good years left. You don't want your window to be that shrunk already.
What about Wilkins?
Wilkins is different because he's younger. Like Wilkins should be good for another half decade pretty easily, I think.
Are you in the camp of being on board with Williams-Wilkins combination?
Well, I mean, I'll be excited to watch it every Sunday. I'll tell you that. I'll be really excited to watch it. Like that. Now you're talking. But I don't think the team's going to spend like that. I think the team is going to spend more on that second or third level, and I'm totally fine with that. I think it makes all the sense in the world to ease yourself in a little bit, sign some 1-year or 2-year deals on guys like Clowney, enough to prove that you can win with, but not so much that you're completely committed to it if things don't work out.
I'm with you too. I think if I were to make my gambling bet on where they'd lean, I'd say the same thing, especially with how much John's talked about Brendan taking that hesitant approach to that tier one of free agency, and that's a little bit of a fool's gold path at times. And that's been, historically speaking, where they've been as far as how they've operated in other times, even in years, Brendan, where they've been going for it when they were in theoretically a Super Bowl windowed time.
All right. And as we speak, by the way, just a couple minutes ago, Chris Jones is now off the board anyway. So that was just a hypothetical. Yeah. He re-upped in
Chiefs,
Kansas City just now.
do they got the deal? Would they
5 years, not yet known money, but
5 years?
it's
Oh,
95 million guaranteed. So we don't know what the full amount is, but it's 95 guaranteed, which I don't know. I guess that's what you have to do to keep him, but they're going to regret that contract at some point in the next few years.
95 guaranteed. I would not have swung that deal. Oh my God, Brendan. That means that he got over 30.
Yeah, he probably just beat out Aaron Donald, right?
He's probably just beat out Aaron Donald at 95 guaranteed. Because what is it going to be 130 on the base through? I mean, geez, it's going to still go up on the base pretty decent.
Yeah.
Whew.
Lock Leonard Williams in a room with no internet so he can't see that
Yeah,
one.
yeah. I hopefully Leonard Williams has got some ink drying on a thing as he's getting this notification on his phone. 95, 95. He's 30 years old.
Yeah, that's what I keep trying to tell people. Just understand that like Leonard Williams is not on the level of a guy like a Chris Jones, and he's not in the same position as a guy like Justin Matabuke.
Yeah.
There shouldn't be an equivalency there. Hopefully there won't be.
I can't go up at that spot for Leonard as much as I want to keep him, as much as I don't want to lose that second round pick, Brendan. I can't get into that territory here if we're talking 5-year contracts. And I mean, no.
Yeah.
But he's going to be expensive. Yikes.
Yeah. So okay. So that put a little bit of a sour mood on the proceedings here. Let's
Yeah, that's tough.
all right. But anyway, just generally speaking, free agency starts on Monday. Well, legal tampering starts on Monday. Players are getting taken off the board, but players are also getting put on the board. And for where the Seahawks are, I think that the players getting put on the board are more interesting to the Seahawks than the ones that are getting taken off. Like we were not going to get Chris Jones. We were not going to get Justin Matabuke, but we could get a Justin Simmons, maybe a guy
Sure.
like that. So
Yeah.
I'm pretty intrigued by the market out there. There's a billion safeties, which is great for us.
Mm-hmm. And it's a strong safety class, which should affect it counter back too as well. As far as just kind of pushes down, keeps pushing that value down for those safeties. It's gonna be hard for them to get paid.
Right. Unfortunately, the tight end market continues to thin out. Like Hunter Henry got picked up already by New England, and Jonnu Smith went to, I think, Miami. So it's getting tough out there.
It makes sense. Neither guy would have been too hot to trot for me on my end, so that's fine.
Right. So going to be interesting to see where we sit next week. But tonight's show is about the draft. It's about the combine. It's about our evaluations of where these players sit. After basically, we have all the information now on these draft picks, right?
Oh yeah.
We basically have everything that we're going to get. We have game tape from their years in college. Now we have testing numbers. So we got to figure out how we feel about them with all this information. So you ready to go?
I'm ready. Let's go.
All right. So we're going to go position by position, and we are going to talk about things big picture wise, but I want to focus in mostly on what we saw at the combine, because that's the latest new information we have. So let's go ahead and just start at quarterback, because, everybody loves the quarterback. Everybody cares about that quarterback position a lot. And it's a pretty fun quarterback class, in fairness. We both have our top fives here.
Mhm.
This one here is mine. I go Caleb, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, Penix, and then 5 is JJ McCarthy. The Hawks Nest has the exact same, except he, at the tail end of his, goes Bo Nix instead of JJ McCarthy. So we're pretty aligned at the top. I think most people are. I think most people kind of have that order.
Mhm.
So just real quick here, what do you see in Bo Nix that I don't see that makes you like him a little more than I do? Just to pick your brain on that for a second.
Well, a guy can only execute the offense he's asked to execute. So being called a check down merchant, well, it's fun to say about him and maybe somewhat representatory of Bo Nix's play on the football field. It's also the offense he's asked to execute, and he executed at a very high level. I don't think that he had the kind of playmakers on the outside to work with that Michael Penix or Jaden Daniels had to work with on the outside. I think in Troy Franklin's case, even with the big year he had and watching his tape, I was not overly blown away by him. And we'll talk about Troy maybe a little bit in the combine where he ran that gauntlet drill like a winding, weaving, as though he was going through a, freaking, I don't know, the Fern Gully. I don't know what it was, but he's got an underrated, very strong arm. His delivery is relatively snappy. There's no real wind up to it. He's got a clean motion. I was hoping that he was going to run the 40 so I could get confirmation he would be in that 4-5 territory. I do think he's more mobile than JJ McCarthy. McCarthy's getting hyped up as being this ultra mobile guy. I think McCarthy's more of a 4.65, 4.7 guy. I think Nix is a little bit more closer to the 4.55 kind of spot. There's a little bit of a difference in the get up and go and getting out there and moving. I think he throws pretty well on the move. I think he's better than Penix throwing on the move, in fact. But I just think he checks a lot of boxes for the position in that. 77% completion percentage. That's astounding. And while, yes, he's throwing a lot of bubble screens and tunnel screens and all that, there's also some throws down the field that he's putting in on an accurate spot as well and doing it with velocity.
All right. I value that for sure. I get all that. I don't know. I've said this for a while now. Bo Nix just screams like I don't know. I get Taysom Hill vibes off of him, and it's not going to be like that. It's not going to be like he's going to move to tight end, but it is going to be he's not enough of a processor to excel in most NFL offenses. Like there's been a lot of buzz that he would be really good in Sean Payton's offense, which I could maybe see that. But I don't know. I'm not into it.
There's plenty of offenses in the NFL not asking their quarterbacks to do a ton of processing. It's a very important trait. I will give you that. He's not asked to do it. Can he not do it because he's asked to not do it? That'd be my bottom line point on this. Are we seeing a lot of him just laser locked in on one read and hanging in there when I'm watching the tape? I don't. I see reads that are predetermined for him to go to a place, but it's not him sitting there staring down a spot at the barrel of the gun and then like, okay, now I'm going to throw it. It's a lot of here's what I've been told to do. And that's fair criticism to put a quarterback. Well, I'm going to question because like I said, processing is important, but when you watch him, he's had some he can do it. I think he can do it pretty well. I admit it's a question mark because he does so little of it, but at the end of the day, when it comes down to that versus even a guy like McCarthy's not to me doing a ton of processing either in that. That's the thing. McCarthy doesn't get any of the same hit that Nix does, which to me seems silly because the difference between the two is really just McCarthy had more of a system that was built upon running the football, and so his attempts get reduced over the top of a guy like Nix, but his stuff is just as much predetermined and where he's going and what he's asked to do. And so I go, well, he doesn't get clipped for it, but Nix does. Doesn't quite add up to me at times.
Okay. So combine wise, the quarterbacks barely did anything. Like, I don't know if you saw it, but the quarterback combine day, Sam Hartman runs the 40 and there's no other quarterback that's running the 40 with him. So they literally just wait for him to come back around so he can do his second 40 time. Yeah. So in totality, 4 quarterbacks ran the 40. Only one of them really ran it well. We did get some throwing drills from these quarterbacks, which I guess that's more important than running in a straight line. But there just wasn't a lot, especially from the top guys. Did anything stand out to you from that combine from the quarterbacks?
Not really. I mean, Milton had the big cannon arm, which got everybody hyped up. I thought Penix looked really good throwing. I thought McCarthy missed some throws, and I thought that some of his liabilities as an arm thrower showed up at times when, especially on the 9 routes where he's trying to show everybody he can get it 50 yards, 55 yards down the field, and he's got to put it on a line. So he throws it out ahead of his receiver over and over when he's throwing that route versus some of the other guys that could lay up a little bit of air underneath it. But no, I don't think there was tremendously much there with the quarterbacks. They didn't do, like you said, they just didn't do a whole lot.
Yeah. Milton, I mean, I'd love to see it. I know it doesn't mean as much as we want it to mean right now because he's got a lot of work to do. And as for the McCarthy thing, real quick, it seems like a big driver of McCarthy's ascent up the board has to do with like his charisma, like off-field stuff. Like I'm
Yeah.
reading a lot of stuff about how like, oh, this guy's gonna inspire a cult of personality in the locker room. This guy's a leader. It seems to be about that. And I don't dislike his game as much as you do, but I am noticing that a lot of this is being driven by, oh, it's the kind of guy that he is, which is I don't know. I don't know if I'm taking a guy in the top 10 because he's a good guy.
Don't forget he's a winner too, Brendan. Don't forget that part too, right? Like Michael Penix has done nothing but win the last couple of years. He's done nothing but win the last couple of years. Is anybody right now talking about Michael Penix and his winning ways? And I know there's some talk about the injury and stuff, but when they're talking about the good things of Michael Penix, when they speak about Michael Penix as a prospect, have you heard anybody talking about the fact that he's a winner?
Not really, no.
No, he's got almost as many wins as JJ McCarthy does the past couple of years. Or if not, the exact same wins. Isn't that interesting? It's almost as though they don't have a thing to point to with JJ like you do with McCarthy. Michael Penix, big hands, can make every single throw, mobility in the pocket. And with McCarthy, you don't have that. So you have to go to these other things that Michael Penix also does have. But that's that searching thing that's going on, to your point on this with McCarthy, to me, which that's where I smell fool's gold. I smell something run amok with that. I smell this, and I've seen it happen with this now, doing this a couple of years, Brendan, where even really smart evaluators of the position start to be caught up on things that are less important to the things that are more important for the NFL game. And these things about being a leader are, yes, it's important. It's important traits to have and everything else. It can't be your leading trait. With no pun intended. You know, at the end of the day, I still need you to make all the throws. At the end of the day, I still need you to be able to get up and get away from guys in short spaces. And if you can't do that, then the leadership stuff doesn't carry as much, nor does the winning thing if you don't have as much of the stacked roster where a lot of that winning was based upon.
Right. So, you know, I'm kind of coming around on it, but not in the way that is necessary to draft him anywhere near where he's going to get drafted, because at this point, I do think he's going to go in that top 12. So it's not even going to be a concern for us.
Please do it. Please, Denver. Somebody just take him to the top. That would make me very happy on draft day.
Real quick here, we got a member message from Holy Hand Grenade. Over under when D gets hurt. They took it off the board.
Yeah, Vegas isn't taking bets on it. They've lost too much money on Eskridge already here. Holy Hand Grenade. Last year's opening injury in the opening preseason kickoff was Vegas had to shut the
right. I love it when they do that. I remember when Peyton Manning was a free agent that offseason and they had the bidding odds for all the teams.
Oh, yeah.
There was one point where it looked like it was such a sure thing he was going to Kansas City. They took it off the board, and then something changed at the last second.
Oh, geez. That would have been wild.
Yeah. Megan, thank you for the member message. Member for 27 months. Woot, Tyler is back and all is well in my world.
Hell yeah, Megan.
I dig it.
We do too, Megan. We digging it as well.
Yep. Nothing to dislike about that arrangement. Just we're seeing more and more players start to actually just take straight up pay cuts. I used to say players never take pay cuts. That's not true anymore. Von Miller did it with Buffalo. To stay in Buffalo, he basically gave back like $12 million. No, go ahead.
That makes sense. I mean, guys, how much you want to move your family and all that here and there and everywhere, and you bounced here and you just want to be in a stable spot. So it makes sense that maybe more of these players are starting to value that a little bit more than a couple extra more million here or there. I mean, what was Von's market going to be otherwise, you know?
But he could have just made them cut him, and then he gets a ton of dead money for all the dead stuff. Coda Dad, thank you for the $10 super sticker as well. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Coda Dad.
Okay, so now let's jump over to running back here, and I'm just going to say it. I haven't been focusing too much on the running backs this year because it doesn't feel very relevant to where I should be interested, right? It's just kind of for educational purposes more than I think this is something the Seahawks could do. So my top 5 was Blake Corum, Trey Benson, Braylon Allen, Jonathan Brooks, and Bucky Irving. So that was mine. Yours was mostly the same in a different order. You went Trey Benson, Jonathan Brooks, Jalen Wright, the Tennessee one, I think. He's Tennessee, I think. Blake Corum, and Bucky Irving. So you're a little less high on Blake Corum than I am. You want to do you see something with him that maybe I'm not?
Lack of speed. I think that he is a very laterally quick player, and that a lot of what he does is sort of his crab walk, that he does to get wide really quickly, and defensive players just can't move at that. He's got some stop and start too to pair with that makes that extra kind of tough to deal with. But he just doesn't have a lot of get up and go. And I think even at the combine, he ran the 40. It wasn't a very, I think, fast 40 that he ran.
Mhm.
4.53, that's fine, but this is 5.8 205 he's coming in at, so he's not bringing any of that as well ability to drive the tacklers forward and to fall forward at that size. So you're looking for kind of a little bit more of that getaway speed to be had there, and that's dinged him down for me a little bit at this point. Now, still third round grade, but yeah.
I feel like he could be pretty explosive in the NFL, honestly. Like maybe like a Maurice Jones-Drew, who was small, but he was also really, really explosive and strong, and he used those assets in a way that most running backs didn't. I feel like he could maybe be like that.
Maurice Jones-Drew had easily about 20 to 25 pounds on Blake Corum, and I'm going to guess as well, we can look it up, but I'm guessing Maurice Jones-Drew was under 155 with his 10-yard split. Corum was at 158. He's nuzzling into that 1.6. So when you talk about explosion, of course, the 10-yard splits to me one of the great spots to look at for that explosion. You feel it on tape, you can feel it on the deal. When I look at Corum, again, this isn't just about the testing numbers. When I watch him on the field, getting away from defenders, when he's got to put and get upfield and go, it ain't there. And I'm with you in that's what can allow a shorter, smaller guy like Maurice Jones-Drew had that extra little bit of burst and then had that extra girth to where when he's hitting you with that burst, bam, the collision happens. I don't just fall down. I'm pushing forward now, or I'm able to fight through that tackle to go to get the extra yardage. I think at the NFL level with the skill set Corum has, I have a little bit of concern, and again, still a third round prospect, but I do have a little bit of concern with that he's not going to do as much of that falling forward. And it's okay. You don't have the big time, big plays you'll be able to create, right? The 10 plus yard plays, because you're not going to really be able to get wide. It's going to be about you getting wide all the time. Because once I send you through the A and B gap, if a guy gets an arm on you, you're going down. And so, I do have a little worry with that on him.
Mm-hmm. All right. So those are our top fives. Combine wise, did anything stand out to you from the running back group? Because I mean, the obvious guy, and the guy that I'm definitely going to mention at some point here, would be Isaac Guerendo, who killed the combine. 221 pounds, 4.33 40, 10-yard split of 155, jumped out the building like that. That's impressive. That stood out to me. I don't know if he did anything for you.
No, very, very impressive player to your point. Also a bit of a player of a new archetype of player, Brendan, that's coming out in the draft the last couple of years. Keaton Mitchell. Who was the other kid, Brendan, that was that small, tiny guy that was super fast out of last year's draft, who also did pretty good for Miami? The Arcane.
Okay.
Right?
Achane. Devon Achane or whatever. I
Devon
know what you're talking
Achane.
about.
Right. We had a Chuba Hubbard a couple of years ago, also kind of like this, right? So a little bit lighter, not going to be a bell cow back, not even really your number two, but as your three kind of like explosive guy who, you give him the handful of carries here and there, but he just gets a lot with it done because that speed's just tough for defenses to kind of factor in when he walks on the field versus where the position's been at. Kind of an interesting guy, I think, from that standpoint. And he's one of the guys that you mentioned, Guerrero, that I would have in that space that I've scouted a little bit that maybe is able to supply a little bit for you on that. I think there was one other guy that had a really fast 40 that I'm looking through my numbers here to see if I can find him, but he's not popping up, who I thought also Jalen Wright was another guy at 4.38, 155, 10-yard split at 210 pounds. 11.2 vertical leap, Brendan. I mean, that's explosion right there. 38 vert, right? Like all of that is tremendously explosive across the line. So kind of see it I'm looking now a little bit more for that type of player, Brendan, because that seems to be one that started to emerge a little bit in recent years as a kind of defining type. And like I said, your Guerrero guy is certainly fits that model. I also think too, Benson went out and probably had the best. And my comp for him coming in the draft, it felt a little bit better confirmed coming in, because my comp coming in for him was Todd Gurley. And I feel a lot more confident about that going out. I don't think he's quite as good as Gurley. I think he's like 93% of Todd Gurley, but a lot of comparisons between those two players.
Yeah. There's it's not a great running back class, but there was some stuff here that popped out to me at the combine, at least. I'm starting to kind of come around to the Jalen Wright thing after the combine that he had. You had him higher than I did for sure. Also, you had Trey Benson #1. He had a pretty nice combine as well, I would say.
That's what I'm saying. That's my Todd Gurley.
Mhm.
Yeah, that was my Todd Gurley comp, and I went, there we go. I was right on the button with it. That's the confirmation of what you see on tape to what you like. I'm like, man, nobody's giving this guy the hype like they're dealing with him like he's a 4.55, 4.6 guy. But I'm seeing on the tape, this guy's legit down in that 4.4, 4.3, high 4.3 range, and that's what he ran. And I was like, yep, tape matches the explosion and burst. It's check that one box. That's an easy eval at that point. It's like done.
Yeah. Tyrone Tracy Jr. from Purdue. He had some nice jump numbers. So that indicates to me explosiveness. I'm kind of intrigued by him a little bit in the later rounds of the draft, although he still might go a little too early for the Seahawks to really think about. Yeah, 1.53 10-yard split, 40-inch vertical. I like that. That caught my attention a little bit.
Yeah, that's in a better spot of things. Definitely, I haven't had a chance to check the tape out on him quite yet, but he's on my list to look through after the combine for sure.
On the other side, Dylan Johnson, not a good combine for him. Maybe he's still injured. I don't know. Maybe he's still injured from the playoff run.
It makes sense. That was a serious injury he had. They played a long season. He's probably busted up in other ways too. But yeah, if he doesn't get a better pro day out by a significant portion, he's going to be a UDFA guy.
Yeah. And there were some Seahawks fans definitely interested in him. So that's a little unfortunate for him.
Yeah, I like him too. So,
all right. So that is, I think, pretty much all there is to say about the running back stuff. Again, it's not a position we're likely to attack until later in day 3 this year. The Snail, thank you for the $2. Brendan, what's your thoughts on Devin Leary? To my recollection, he has a bit of a noodle arm. He's one of those UDFA Brock Purdy type QBs, but I haven't looked into him too much yet. Brandon, have you?
Yeah, good mechanics, good layer thrower, kind of a soft tossing guy. The arm strength's a little bit of the question mark with him. Short passes, he's got the pop on him, but when he starts having to push the ball down the field, the further it goes, the less the steam comes out of it. It's like a balloon's having the air let out of it as you get 30, 40, 50 yards down the field. Not an anticipatory thrower. He really needs to see it open to throw it. If you're that soft tossing guy, you've got to throw with the anticipation. You're looking for him with being at 6'1", a little bit of that Brock Purdy mindset of, pop, pop, pop. He's just going through and he's got a plan and he's able to execute the lack of arm strength out there. But with him, he still just doesn't have the feel at the position at his size with the lack of arm strength to make me believe he's anything but fringe league backup. You're muted.
Sorry about that. Another one of these Brock Purdy clones. There are like 6 of them every year.
There are. And with him, he doesn't have Purdy's get up and get away speed. So that's, it's just, it's a little bit, that's where that quarterback stuff drops off after we get past the top line guys here, man. It gets a little bit thin.
Janeth Kumar, thank you for the $5. How would y'all feel if the Seahawks trade down from 16? I'm not against it at all. No problems with it whatsoever.
Yeah, my 1-2 punch on this, Janeth, has been if one of my pure blood blue chip prospects falls to us at 16, I certainly am at the forefront of saying I jump on that from a value-based standpoint. But if we were to find it to be that those guys are off the board, we're at 16, then trade down is my second most wanted thing to do. I think it's tremendously smart, and that's where the value is in this draft to me, is in tier 2. That's where the best part of this draft is in tier 2. The star power is not quite as much in that blue chip. There's not as much depth, I think, to the back end. There's decent depth in certain positions, but tier 2 is where it's at.
Yeah. Again, to me, it just all depends on how the draft falls. Like if Bowers is there, I'm not trading down for anything. Yeah. If the people that I don't want aren't there, then it's different. But we're going to have to see how the draft falls first, period.
Fatano's looking at, by the way, we'll talk him saying he's going to be off the board. So the trade back to get him has got to be taken out. We'd have to.
He's, I think, kind of now become one of the guys who I would be okay taking at 16. I know you don't totally agree. We'll talk about that in a little bit here.
I'm okay because his arms were better than what I thought they were going to be. That, but let's talk about him in a second. But his arm, the fact that he's got the arm length means he can play tackle, and he tested and looked fluid enough at there where you can trust that he doesn't just have to be a guard. So there's smartness there.
Great. Concierge with Nolan, thank you for the $5. Nixon McCarthy give me Drew Lock and Mac Jones vibes, quality-ish backups. Neither has the traits that JS is rumored to like Mahomes and Allen.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of my thing. It feels like JS likes these prototypical quarterbacks who have it all.
Yeah.
And Nix and McCarthy are certainly not that. Caleb is in this draft, but honestly, if there's a quarterback that we can actually get that he really likes in this draft, I kind of feel like it might be Rattler. And I'm not saying he does, but if I had to guess one guy outside of the top 4 that he's fallen in love with, it would be him.
Yeah. And I wouldn't be surprised if Drake May was his number 1 guy, to your point. May's got a lot of those qualities of the Mahomes Allen in his build and set. I mean, even Caleb does it, but he's 6'1". Drake checks everything off. But I think Nolan, that's sensational comps. I think that's great comps. I would put the same. I think McCarthy's does have more mobility than Mac Jones did. They do come from kind of 2 different offenses, but as far as their upside outlook, what they can bring, yeah, I think that's accurate. Same thing with the Knicks one, man. I think that's good comps.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so now wide receiver, and again, this is not a position the Seahawks need to be thinking about that hard, especially after today. We don't really have room. But I did put together my top 5, which was Marvin Harrison Jr., of course, Rome Odunze. I am now 100% on board after seeing some of his testing numbers. Number 3, Malik Nabiers. Number 4, Adonai Mitchell. And number 5, Brian Thomas Jr. And yours was very close. Marvin Harrison Jr., number 1. Malik Nabiers, number 2. Number 3, Rome Odunze. Number 4, Brian Thomas. And number 5, Lad McConkey, one of the best names in this draft for sure.
Well, it takes me back, Brendan, too, because I'm old as hell. So, it's the old back in the late 80s, the Giants got in the Super Bowl, and they're beating the pants off, I think, the Broncos in the Super Bowl. Do you remember the Super Bowl, by the way?
Well, I know of it. I was not born when it was played, but I know of it. Yes.
So you have this.
Elway took a sack in the end zone for a safety.
Totally. So there's a scene. There's a late play in the game, and the Giants had the plucky guy named McConkey on their team, and he's like the fifth white. He's like that fifth white wide receiver in the '80s that was never getting on the field, but he's just you go out there, dude, do what you can, guy. Tries to, and Bavaro tips the ball in the air in the end zone, and McConkey gets the catch, and they're already up by 35 points. It's one of those pinnacle moments where you're already beating the pants off a team, and Jermaine Kearse goes and gets you a touchdown reception that in the Super Bowl at the end. You're like, all right, we're capping this off. But I was wondering with him if he was his relation. He's not, but it just McConkey name just was solidified in my young mind at that point. He went out and went 4.39 on the 40. With Ladd, there was a matter of, does he have that explosiveness and speed on the edge to be on the outside? And he showed you that. I don't know if there's a better route runner in this draft than McConkey. And his hands, I think, are very strong. He's been one of the guys with Brock Bowers there that's been the 2, maybe forefront players on that offense over the past couple of years and driving that offense. And so I'm very much with him. I like Adonai Mitchell's upside. He's very close into that group for me, Brendan, but I think that there's still more he has to go out there and kind of claim. It's sort of more promise to him and upside with him more than it is knowing really what you're getting there with him.
Right. And I like him too. He was just outside my top 5. Odunze, I'm now convinced is going to be Larry Fitzgerald.
That's my comp. It's been my comp for a while.
Yeah, I wasn't sure he was going to be able to get open in the NFL because I thought he would run a 4.6 and everything would be contested. But when he ran that 4.45, I think it was, and he had the really nice 3 cone, I was like, okay, this guy, he's going to make it. He's going to 100% make it. If he can run like that, he's not going to have a problem getting open at the NFL level. So I'm on board with Mr. Odunze. As for the combine stuff, you talked about McConkey having a good combine. I talked about Rome. Did anything in the lower areas of this draft stand out to you in terms of performance?
Tez Walker was able to reclaim a little bit of value back from bad Senior Bowl performances in a middle part of the year. Luke McCaffrey probably raised himself, I think, into the third round from a guy that maybe a month ago you're looking maybe more fifth roundish, but has pushed himself up with his short area quickness and stuff. Another guy that's probably showing you he can play a little bit more on the outside, maybe than you thought. Obviously, Brian Thomas, I think, solidified himself on the high end. I know that you're managing lower end, but he certainly had a great combine and put himself in that right spot of things. Aside from that, I don't think that there was necessarily a guy individually that stood out. There's a lot of fast times, Brendan. I mean, these guys there's good size to them this year. There's good weight to them this year. There's good length to them this year. We don't have T-Rex, 170-pound, 5'9" mighty mites all across the board. A little bit like it felt like last year, didn't it? With, your Tank Dells and your Jordan Addisons, and you're going, man, can any of these guys eat a sandwich, please?
Well, in that vein, what you're just talking about there, Anthony Gold, I actually kind of liked what I saw from him. He's one of those smaller guys. He's like a Tank Dell, a little bigger than Tank Dell, but ran a 1.49 10-yard split, 1.49, so sub 1.5, jumped out the building. I don't know. I feel like he could be like a good return man in the NFL at minimum, and he could be, in best case scenario, kind of like what Tank Dell was for the Texans last year.
Yeah. No, I think I haven't had a chance to look a lot at his tape, but interesting and intriguing prospect with that explosiveness he brings. Which 149, you're flying at 149.
Yeah, if you're talking about somebody like really late in the draft, there was also Bub Means, Pittsburgh Panther. He had a pretty good combine for a guy who's bigger. He's like 212 pounds, ran a 4.43. Also, vert jumped 40 inches. So there's a lot of explosiveness there. So he caught my attention as a maybe potential Seahawks target. But after today's news, we're probably not looking at receiver at all.
Or it'll be a Bud Memes. It'll be a late guy. Hard to see it being an early guy at this point. I mean, that would be pretty surprising to see them take somebody at that spot.
Mm-hmm. All right, moving along now to tight end here, and this position is now very, very relevant to our interests here for sure. In fact, I've done a lot of digging into tight end over the last several days here. My top 5 is number 1, Brock Bowers, number 2, Jatavion Sanders, number 3, Cade Stover, number 4, Theo Johnson, number 5, Ben Sinnott. And the TheSeahawksNest top 5 was, the top 2 were the same, Bowers, Sanders, but then he goes Tip Ryman, somebody who's really just burst onto the scene lately, like Kramer going into Jerry's apartment, Cade Stover, and number 5, Ben Sinnott. So the main difference that we have is you have Tip Ryman in your top 5. I have Theo Johnson. So I know a little bit about Tip. I know what makes him exciting, but explain to the folks at home what's going on with Tip Ryman.
Really big dude who is sort of cut from the cloth of being a little bit more of your old school type. Let me get my notes up here on him just a second here. He's a bit more built to be your old school type tight end, 6'5", legitimately 271. So not this, sub 250 pound, 245 pound guy. He can move people off the ball. Just a guy that just puts in the work to me when I watch him as a blocker on tape, where he just gets after it. And then I believe that with what he put up, especially in some of his testing times, that there's a lot of untapped potential there in this kid and what he can bring to the table from the receiving. Number 1, the quarterback play at Illinois sucked. Number 2, the offense didn't even try to work somewhat to feature him. When they wanted to throw the ball to the tight end, it was more to the move H-back tight end in the offense than it really was to Tip Ryman. He was targeted 24 times this past season. He made 19 receptions. He catches the ball when you throw it to him. He's an overall really good player. He's a gnarly blocker with finish. He's a really big pass catching target that he supplies you. He's maybe not as much of the pass catcher as like a Theo Johnson, but I think with the Theo Johnson, he's a little bit more of the workout warrior in what he's tested versus what he's shown on the tape versus Ryman, where his workout warriorness shows on the tape.
Yeah. I looked at Tip and, it catches your attention, right? And it's not quite Darnell Washington, right? Like nobody's going to be Darnell Washington.
Nobody's Darnell.
Yeah, it's kind of the same thing where you're like, wait a minute, why wasn't this guy better? Why didn't this guy do more? Like it's, and in the case of Darnell, it was because he was behind Brock Bowers. But in the case of this guy, it was just he doesn't have a quarterback. So I like Tip too. I haven't quite ascended him up that high yet, but he's definitely on my radar. And he brings things to the table that are, like you said, are becoming rare at the tight end position.
Yeah. Finding a good overall guy like that, and a guy that can be in line and do it all from the position a bit and give you the pass catching ability, not just be a block of wood out there. He can give you that.
All right. So beyond the top 5 at the combine, a couple guys who I thought did well were of Jared Wiley, the TCU guy. He's somebody who's going to be dancing around that top 5, even if he never gets there.
Yeah.
And I would also say Devin Culp, although he kind of needs to be that fast because of how undersized he is. But he destroyed the 40-yard dash, 4.47 as a tight end. That's very close to like Kyle Pitts.
Yeah. Well,
So
and I like
those guys stood out to me.
Jared Wiley's really fun on tape because he moves a lot. He moves a little bit. I'm not trying to make the comp, but he's got a lot of movement that looks a lot like Kelsey on tape. The way he angles his body and sort of swerves, with the size that he has at the position, he's like a stretched out Kelsey, not quite maybe as explosive or quite as athletic, but a really interesting prospect. The guys you mentioned, Culp's definitely, because you mentioned the size, also maybe a lack of productivity coming out with question marks on him. There's some opening too for these later round guys, because guys like, Tre'Davious Sanders, what do you run, a 4.69? That's his claim to fame's got to be the speed and quickness, and he's still on our spots, but
yeah, well, I'll tell you, I've watched his 40 times. He stumbled both times. He doesn't know how to run a 40. I think that on a football field, he'll be much faster than that. I'm not that worried about it personally.
Yeah, and it wasn't enough to ding. This is where you can see with both of us, not enough to ding me on him with having a little bit of an underwhelming combine, but it was a little bit underwhelming. I think both him and Jaheim Bell, another guy that the Hawks have met with that I know we're going to pay a lot of attention to, just didn't necessarily have as much they brought to the table on it.
Yeah.
Hoping a little bit more from him on it.
Yeah, I think Stover was good enough. He's, I've called him like a potential Will Dissly replacement for a while now because I think he plays a similar way. He actually ran a 4.65, which was pretty good for a guy who plays the way that he does. So, I'm still, he's never going to be a superstar, but I think he's going to be a good player in the NFL.
He's functional. He's not going to, he gives you the high floor of, he'll come in there and give you some functional play and help you out. Maybe it's got to be specific to the areas of the game, but help nonetheless.
All right, so that is tight end. Next up is left tackle here. And again, left tackle is not a position I've invested a lot of time into because it's just not likely the Seahawks go that way. More than any other position, it wouldn't really make sense, right? You've got 2 guys on rookie deals, a starter, a backup. Where are you going to fit in another left tackle, right?
Yeah, I don't see it as being a position that they look to address. Maybe a guy that's got flexibility with it, but yeah.
So my top 5 is Fashanu, number 1, Joe Alt, number 2, Jordan Morgan, number 3, Patrick Paul, number 4, Javon Foster, number 5. You were a little bit different. You had Joe Alt in number 1 and Fashanu number 2, so those were flipped. You did have Morgan. You had Foster at 4. And then you had Delmar Glaze, a guy I was just scouting earlier today a little bit, at 5.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I know a couple months ago you were a little unsure about Joe Alt. Has something kind of changed for you with that read?
Yeah, he's 20 years old. He's out dominating on the field and what he's doing at that age. So, when you've got a guy 3 years younger, this is the Jamar Chase. I call this my Jamar Chase rule. And this was something I locked in on Jamar Chase. When Jamar Chase is out there in the SEC taking guys' souls at 19 years old, that's got to be brought into the evaluation point a little bit versus, guys at 23 years old coming out into the draft, normal age and all that other stuff. Alt also has the bloodlines I was not as aware of to begin with this. His father is in the Chiefs Ring of Honor as an offensive lineman. I trust a lot in these kind of bloodline things to a big degree. And I've got to be honest, I'm looking at updating my list beyond what I sent you on this. Fashano's starting to drop for me in my eyes just a little bit, and not far, but I very well at this point would put Fashanu at 3, and I might now at this point raise up Fatanu to the number 2 best left tackle in this draft.
I could see that. I'm still looking at Fatanu as a guard, but you're right. I think that there may be some team out there that views him as a tackle, and he might be I think he's at least a top 3 left tackle in this draft, clearly, right? Has to be.
I think guard is out the door at this point. I think it was smart of us to look at that a little bit. And I didn't anticipate that the arm length is going to be at 34.5-inch long arms for Troy Fatano. That's not, I mean, you're looking for 33 on tackles, 34.5. So he's not only now just like hitting the mark of barely long enough arms, but he's a well above average in that plane, and then tests well across the board in his movement abilities. He is going to be a left tackle now and into the future in the NFL. It's just, to me, it's after this combine performance, the way he moved in the drills and his slide back and forth, there's nothing he's limited by not to get that done. Maybe he's not super uber explosive, but good enough on that. And he's one of those football quick guys when you watch him on tape. I mean, he's bouncing around there like a bunny rabbit.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll talk about Troy in just one moment here. Guys who I thought tested well at left tackle, the Kingsley Suamataia. I don't know what position he's going to play in the NFL, but I thought he did good. The BYU tackle.
Mm-hmm.
I guess you also had the South Dakota State guy. I think it was. What was his name? I thought he did
Garrett
good.
Greenfield.
Yeah, Garrett Greenfield. He might go to right tackle in the NFL, though. Actually.
Yeah, I think he's a little bit of a big. Yeah, he's a little not as explosive.
Mm-hmm. Anything else you think should be called out at left tackle?
I'm looking just through some of my notes on guys. Like you said, it wasn't really a big part that we're looking to address. I think that the guy that's technically a tackle that'll be, I think, potentially kicked in Goncalves.
Yeah, I have him getting kicked inside. Goncalves.
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
literally spelled Goncalves.
I can't. I look at that name 50 times. I can't say it at any point in time. No, there's a couple guys that I think are. It's more of guys got pulled off the board, Brendan. I think because there was some big, stiff, not as mobile guys, and that's got to be at the center for one of these players we're looking at. So it was more of, there was just guys you could kind of remove off more than it was adding on the testing scores for left tackle at least.
All right, so now we segue over to a left guard here, and my top 5 was Troy Fatanu, who we just spoke about maybe not being a left guard anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Number 2, Graham Barton. Number 3, Cooper Bebe. Number 4, Dominic Pooney. And number 5, Matt Goncalves, the aforementioned Matt Goncalves. And yours was number 1, Cooper Bebe. Number 2, Graham Barton. Number 3, Troy Fatanu. Number 4, Brandon Coleman. Number 5, Javion Cohen.
Yeah.
Right. And again, Fatanu, like maybe he's too good. That's his flaw. He's too good at playing offensive lineman. He's going to bump out to tackle in all likelihood. I will say, if the Seahawks have the opportunity to draft him and move him to guard, I would still want to do that because I think he'll be a good guard as well.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And I'll say in general on this, there was much more right guards to look through so far in the draft than I found as left guards. So it's becoming as much as ever just that tough position to find good guys that can hang up over there.
Mm-hmm. Right. So I thought Bebe had a great combine, by the way. I thought Bebe looked great. He was a guy who you might have been a little bit concerned about mobility-wise, but his testing numbers were actually great. What was it, like a 5.0340? The 10-yard split was really good, too, I think. It was 1.75. The vertical jump was not good. The broad jump wasn't good, but the 3-cone was great. The 20-yard shuttle was great. So I'm pretty high on Bebe. I like the fact that he's 6'3", so he's going to win those leverage battles because he's going to be the low man all the time. And he's a guy who still, for some reason, I don't know why, still being looked at as like a second rounder or third rounder by a lot of people. I would love to get him there, but I don't think it's going to happen.
I don't either. I think NFL people, when it comes to draft day, his value will be understood and just being kept as a secret. Maybe they're all playing their cards close to the vest, but he was one of the easier evaluations in the draft to watch and go, oh, okay, yeah, this guy's going to play in this league, start this league for years, and he'll be really good. Mm-hmm. But it was good to see him solidify that, especially like I was saying, because there's so few guys guard wise. When I'm looking at these right guards, Brendan, I don't see guys that, well, you could play both sides. You know, I'm going, nope, that's a right guard. That's a right guard. That's a right guard. So, I like this list of guys, but I think if you don't go left guard early, there may not be one there late.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you had Brandon Coleman at number 4. I'm a little worried about him because at the Senior Bowl, he looked a lot more comfortable at tackle. And I don't think he's going to be able to play tackle in the NFL. But when you put him at guard, which is where he should play in the NFL for obvious reasons, doesn't seem very comfortable. So I don't know where he ends up.
Yeah, it's possible with that he ends up. There's some question mark on a couple of these guys. I mean, even in Bebe's case, he's been playing tackle. So there's a little bit of fluidity here on where these guys are going to finally kind of settle in at as their last kind of landing zone, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. And Cohen is interesting, Javion Cohen, because he put on a bunch of weight last year and didn't look nearly as good. So he needs to drop that weight like he was at Alabama. And I think he'll be a really good left guard. But right now it's like,
yeah, it's weird. He put on the weight because he struggles so much in run blocking. He's such a good pass protector. So I feel like he added the weight to do that, but he just got kind of big and a little bit less mobile. Certainly wasn't willing to test, went 26.5 on the vert, 8.8 on the broad, so you're going, all right, I can see why you didn't run your 40. I can see why you didn't do your 3 cone. It was not going to be good. And again, for a guy that we'd be looking at that needs to be in the mobile based system and move around a little bit, that's a bit disconcerting on some of those numbers for him. So it's a bit thin there at that guard position, Brett. It's a little rough.
One sleeper, Mason McCormick, South Dakota State. He tested great. He had the best testing numbers of any interior lineman. 5.08 40, 171 10-yard split, 36-inch jump, 9'9" broad. His arms are almost 34 inches long, but I do think he'll be a guard in the NFL. Little undersized, but he's a great fit for his own scheme. I like him a lot, actually.
It's probably what we're gonna have to do, which is take a guard and get him into guard, take a tackle and move him into guard. And so, small school guys, South Dakota State's been pushing out some pretty good prospects as of recent. It's not some just tiny school that doesn't give you anything ever, and so it's been putting out some guys. And this is what we'll probably have to do because, like I say, there's few left guards. You're probably gonna have to kick them out from somewhere else to find one that'll work. It's been a position that's getting leaner and leaner. It seems like.
Mm-hmm. All right, so that is it for left guard. I think it's a better draft for left guards than usual. Usually they're hard to find. This one has a few more that I like than typical. Like usually left guards like 2 guys the whole draft, I feel like.
It's true. It tends to be that way. So it is a little bit deeper than it normally is. But this is going to be a vital need for us coming into this draft, it looks like, unless we really attack it free agency.
Mm-hmm. Centers. Center next. Our lists were pretty close. I went number 1, JPJ. Number 2, Cedric Van Pran. We got 2 centers with 3 names here. I like it.
I did too.
3, Zach Frazier. Number 4, Mr. Bortolini. And number 5, Bo Limmer. Yours was number 1, JPJ. Number 2, Cedric Van Pran. Number 3, Zach Frazier. And then at the end, you went Drake Nugent, number 4, Matt Lee, number 5. So our top 3s, I don't feel like anybody really has a different top 3 than that. I think everybody's kind of settled into JPJ, then Cedric Van Pran, then Zach Frazier.
Yeah, and I maybe at this point, because I sent you the list, I hadn't done my jump into Tanner Bortolini yet before we'd done the list. So I probably would bump Matt Lee for Bortolini at this point from where I am, or even Bo Kimmer, because those guys have emerged.
Yeah, I feel like we got to get Bortolini and then get Ben DiNucci at quarterback. So Bortolini is snapping the ball to DiNucci.
They could do this thing. Yeah. What is that? The Italian thing they all do.
Tommy DeVito. Yeah, it makes everybody hungry when they're watching the Seahawks games. They got to go eat.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, Bortolini, insanely good testing numbers. 4.94, 169, 10-yard split. 4.28, 20-yard shuttle. He had a 20-yard shuttle that like some running backs have. And he's 303 pounds. It's not like he's one of those 270-pound guys that are just kind of wannabe centers.
Yeah.
So he's a freak. And I think he's now in the top 4 for me for sure.
That's where I think he's got to, at the very least, elevate to the top 5, and he may push into that mark because he's so scheme fit to what we want. He also offers you versatility. He's played all 5 offensive line positions in his time at Wisconsin. So he's a good player. I went back and watched the tape just like, I think it was last night, in looking at him, and beyond the testing numbers, his mobility shows up, Brendan. He's a real master at, I think center's his spot. So that's where he needs to settle in at. And I think he's really great at first getting the dual block, peeling off, getting to the linebacker really quickly and landing that block. He does it over and over again on tape, really stands out with him. But the mobility stuff is so much of a good fit. And there's not a lot of mobility guys as much in this draft. Even a Van Pran that can execute movement, he's a little heavy footed. He just gets it done because he's just so damn powerful. He doesn't need to be squaring you up. He can one arm you and just send you flying.
Yeah. I know we both still love JPJ, as we should. But one thing that I noticed watching the combine, he seems like he's top heavy. Seems like
Yeah.
he's like, I don't know, it looks like he's gonna fall over sometimes because he's carrying so much weight above the waist.
Well, he's not a pure mover, right? That's also, he didn't test either, right? And there's a reason there, because 330, he was going to probably run a 4.35 40, right? 1.7 plus 10-yard split. So that's where he may not factor in as much as people love him. And I think he's got great potential, the best potential of any center in this draft. Is he a scheme fit? Maybe not as much for the mobility side of it, because he's not going to move as much in space. I think, as some people said, I was hearing this the other night, like maybe what he needs to really be is you put him on one of those teams with one of these undersized quarterbacks that's 6'1", Brendan, that you need a guy that just is a freaking impossible to get around up front, keeping the pocket clean. Because as we know, the worst thing for undersized quarterbacks is pressure up the middle, not off the edges, but the stuff that comes up the middle. So that may be more of a team that looks to potentially target, Jackson at that point.
Mm-hmm. And Bo Limmer is not a guy I was thinking I was going to like that much because he plays for Arkansas, but he actually is good in motion. He's actually pretty good in space, which I was not expecting because he's playing for Arkansas. But actually, we have a Wisconsin center doing the same thing too. You usually don't see that. Usually, those guys are the maulers.
They are. Yeah, it's kind of surprising on him. They tend to be big trash cans on that. So yeah, he works good, and he's got a wide body on him too. When you first look at him, you're like, oh, this guy's not going to move, but he pulled it off.
Yeah.
He's good.
What do you know about Drake Nugent? He's a guy I haven't looked at very much.
Another real wide body guy, just naturally built like the center position you'd like him to, like if you're kind of carving him out, like I'd like this guy to be about twice as wide as the normal guy. Really quick off the snap. He just gets into the chest of defensive linemen. He's more of a one-on-one guy than Oluwatimi was, right? They're sort of different players in what they do. I think he's more of the run blocker. Oluwatimi was more of the pass blocker. But obviously, this scheme asks you to hit a lot of those reach blocks. It just seemed like Michigan did a lot less of doing that. Oluwatimi was all over the place. It was reach block here, then it was pull in space on the next snap, then it was get to the second level on the third snap, and you'd 1, 2, 3. You'd see that in a three stack of plays. With Nugent, it's a little more of the wham, right? He's hitting that nose tackle every time. And you can trust him one-on-one with the nose tackle. You can trust him to not need to be just a double team guy all the time, but it's less of him doing a little bit of what you saw from Oluwatimi last year. But I think he can hold up and do it. And his testing numbers weren't good, but they weren't bad. It was just okay.
Right. By the way, one thing that should be noted is that a couple of sites are listing Graham Barton as a center now. They think he's going to end up playing center in the NFL. Yeah. I still have him at left guard for now, but he may end up going to center. And if he did, I think he would immediately become probably my second best center on the board.
I would probably put him over Jackson Powers because of that mobility angle. Even though maybe even in Jackson, I see a higher upside to him as a player. It does come down to sometimes you may be this great player, but if you're not a scheme fit, I don't know. That's a tough call. You know what I mean? But if I've got a Barton aspect, I might have to put him a little bit higher because he is so good with that.
Yeah. And one sleeper that I had from the combine in terms of combine performance was Jacob Monk, the Duke center. Mm-hmm. I think that he did pretty good for himself. Really athletic, 5.09 40, 1.66 10-yard split, which is crazy good for a center.
That's very good.
Yeah. And he's 308 pounds too. So it's not like he's one of those 270-pound frauds. I remember, I think it was 3 years ago, Illinois had a center in the draft that was like 260. And I'm like, come on.
Yeah. It was good to see that all the weights were holding up this year on that. Everybody's over the well to 300 pounds. Like, okay, guys, there we go. This ain't 1985 anymore. Come on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anything else catch your eye from the combine with the centers?
Not really. Charles Turner looked okay. For me, I don't know if he'll be as much of a fit though. Another guy that's a little bit athletically limited, but he looked pretty good. But yeah, I don't think he'll necessarily be a fit.
Dylan McMahon. Maybe he's a little smaller than I like, but he is a good athlete. I do kind of like Dylan McMahon.
He can move a little bit. He can move. He is short spaces. He had a good little shuttle and 3-cone to him.
Mm-hmm. All right. So that's center. Now we're going to bump over to right guard here. Our lists were somewhat similar. I went with right guard. Number 1, Christian Haynes. Number 2, Christian Mahogany. Number 3, Zach Zinter. Number 4, Layden Robinson. Number 5, CJ Hansen. You went number 1, Zach Zinter, number 2, Christian Haynes, number 3, Tate Ratledge, who I completely forgot about. Did he not declare? or something? Because I'm not seeing him on any of the lists.
Some of
Like
these guys are late.
if anybody can confirm or deny in the chat that Tate Ratledge declared, because I do remember liking him a lot during the season. But when I was looking things up, I didn't see him on the database at all.
Oh, no, he returned. So got to remove that one off for me. So Christian Mahogany becomes my guy. Christian Mahogany, Connor Colby.
Connor Colby, yeah. Yeah, goddamn Georgia and their NIL money. That's more money than these guys are ever going to make in the NFL, probably.
These guys waited till the 25th hour. All of them did, because I know a lot of them, I was like, they're in. Nope, I'm out last minute. So, but dang. Okay.
All right. So I bumped Zach Zinter down a little bit because of the injury. And admittedly, I do think he'll probably be the number one guy if and when he recovers from that injury.
Yeah, I agree. And based on what I'm hearing, it should be a full recovery. This is just a clean break thing.
Yeah, you had a Connor Colby here. He was a guy that I had an eye on during the season, but he didn't quite make the cut for me. The Iowa guy, right? He's Iowa.
Yeah.
So, did you see anything you liked with him in particular more than some of these others?
I just feel like he's got a bit of a heavy hand, fluid mover. Quick twitch guys can give him a little bit of an issue, so there's going to be some question marks with him. To be honest with you, it's there's probably a little bit in looking at the right tackle. I might move a guy like Satoa Lamumui out of Utah into this spot with him. But I got to be honest with you, just the right guards, right tackles, once we got past the first 3 or 4, wasn't as impressive to me as a group on both the left guards and right guards here. You know, once you get to the other guys, I mean, who's really, everybody just kind of looks like a pure right guard, and not a lot of really pure movers outside of, you know, this guy, a little bit of okay here, you know.
I think CJ Hansen might be that guy. Now, he was playing right guard at Holy Cross. That may not fly in the NFL, but he's actually really mobile, really good athlete for his size. He's just 300 flat, though, so that might not cut it at right guard in the NFL, because you want to be like able to take on the 1 techs and 0 techs. So we'll see if that works out. But CJ Hansen would be one guy I would maybe flag as a really good move right guard.
And I've got admittedly some guys to look at through the right guard role here on some guys, but it's been there's been, like, you know, Donovan Jackson's just a mover. Michael Jurgens is okay. I don't know. It's been a bit of an underwhelming group there on that side. There's some definite better strength spots in this draft as far as other positions go.
All right. And right guard's always kind of tough because they tend to all be pretty lumbering, slower guys.
And we need mobility.
Yeah. So there might end up being like some left guard convert, right? We pick up some mediocre left guard and move him to right guard. And that's how we end up resolving this. That's I think basically what the Rams did. They picked up Kevin Dotson from the Steelers, who was playing left guard, moved him to right, and he became an elite player last year.
Yeah, because their system will move off that movement. So you get that movement-based left guard working off of right guard. Their system less operates on needing the right guard to just handle 1 techs all day, because you're going to do more movement in space. And so it makes sense that it works that way. And ours should be something similar to that degree. We need athleticism. We need mobility. We just can't have guys that are heavy-footed. It won't work.
All right. Last offensive position is right tackle. It is a really good right tackle draft this year, I think.
Excellent.
This is special. Yeah. So my top 5 goes Talise Fuaga, number 1, Amarius Mims, number 2, JC Latham, number 3, Tyler Guyton, number 4, and Blake Fisher, number 5. And you have number 1, Talise Fuaga, number 2, JC Latham, number 3, Amarius Mims, number 4, Tyler Guyton, and number 5, Roger Rosengarten. So very similar, our 2 lists, I think. You flipped Mims and Latham, and you had Rosengarten instead of Fisher. So I saw that picture of Amarius Mims standing next to a normal person, and then I saw him run that 40, and I was like, oh, I can't resist.
Yeah, that's what got me. I think it didn't get me, but it's what gets me with watching the tape with him before that, because you see it on the tape too, where you're just like, oof, this guy's built different. I think Latham is your Darnell Wright from last year, right? Picked in the middle of the first round with Chicago. You know what you're getting. It ain't sexy. It ain't like there's a ton of star power behind it. He's going to play for a lot of years league. He should be really solid. The floor feels very good on him. Mims, it's a little more of the ceiling aspect. Maybe he doesn't have quite the floor of Latham, but he has the higher ceiling. And so that makes me go, I got to go to the ceiling on this when we're talking about first round. First round's not about floor. And that's what drove me at that point to put one over the other on my side.
Mm-hmm. And you had Rosengarten instead of Fisher. I think Rosengarten's probably going to creep up there at that point. He had a really nice Senior Bowl. He had a really good combine, by the way. He literally had the fastest 40 time of any lineman. A nice 10-yard split, by the way, as well, 173. And I feel like people are a little too down on him because of the national title game, where he did get beat up a little bit, but he's really good.
Every tape I watched on him outside, maybe that national title game, I kept going, man, this is so impressive. It's one of those guys you go, man, I'm not hearing anything about him. I'm hearing 6th, 7th roundish. I'm hearing late round attribution to him. And I go, I'm just not seeing what I'm seeing from that on the tape. And let's not forget with Washington, it's not like they went through some weak ponies throughout the year. They had a lot of ranked opponents they had to go through and play, and some decent players that time that he had to work off the edge, as well as working as basically the blindside protector for Michael Penix. Helped to keep him untouched, helped to keep him clean throughout the course of the year. Very snappy out of his stance, very quick off on his feet, just stands out. Sure did at the Senior Bowl in the one-on-ones. He's out there and in his stance, ready to lay his thing. And it's very hard for defensive linemen, because they're like, dang, you're ready to go. So I like him. I do think he's going to creep up, and had a great combine. Great.
I think he's going fourth round minimum. Yeah,
I agree. That's the bare minimum at least. I think definitely he'll get in the third.
Mm-hmm. What were you about to say? Something about great post?
I forgot.
Okay, sorry about that.
No, you're good. I was being.
Anything else at the combine regarding that right tackle position? I'm looking real quick here. It was mainly just the Roger Rosengarten show for me at that position, but maybe Christian Jones at Texas did pretty good, I'd say.
Yeah, Jones is interesting. I've got a 5th round grade on him, but he had, I think, a good combine, and I'm trying to get to my notes on him real quick here. There we go. He had a good combine, tested decent, and he's got some nice springs in his ankles. He's a little bit of a stiff mover, but he sort of is one of those guys that stays on his toes all the time and bouncy. So even though he's a little stiff mover, he gets around it by just kind of keeping the feet always active. So not necessarily a super mover, but gets it done kind of, even though the frame and the stiffness ain't there. Long arms, 34.5-inch long arms on that 6'5" frame. So he's a big boy out there. But yeah, he's interesting.
All right. So I think that's it for the offense. I'm going to swing on over to the defense now. Sound good to you?
Yeah, let's roll.
All right. So I decided to separate the defensive linemen out into nose tackles and then like the actual linemen, just to kind of differentiate, because there's a big difference between T'Vondre Sweat and Chris Jenkins, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So my top 5 nose tackles were T'Vondre Sweat, number 2, McKinley Jackson, number 3, Jordan Jefferson, number 4, Justin Rogers, and number 5, Christian Boyd. Had to dig deep to find those last 2, by the way. It's there are not a lot of big nose tackles out there these days.
No, there's not in this draft.
Yeah, and you went, let's see here. Number 1, T'Vondre Sweat. Number 2, Tyleek Williams. 3, McKinley Jackson. And 4, Nazir Stackhouse. So it's thin. You couldn't even get to 5. It's tough. But we're both in unison on Sweat. We both think that it wasn't a great combine, but it was an entertaining combine. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, it was good enough. And it was going to be depending on his weight, how you valued his 40 time. If he came in 340, you'd love to see him try to break 5 flat. But if he's going 360, then okay. No.
Yeah. One day we'll find another 360-pound guy that can just fly. But
sounds like Stackhouse went back to college too. So all the Georgia guys are going back to college.
Yeah, and I think Tyleek may have as well. I didn't see him on any of the lists. So if that's the case, yeah, my understanding is that he did go back. I didn't see him on the database. And if that's the case, then it's literally just Sweat and McKinley Jackson, who I don't know. I'm not in love with McKinley Jackson. He's just kind of put him there because you had to put somebody there. He had basically the same testing numbers as Sweat at 40 fewer pounds, to give you an idea.
It's pretty unexciting after Sweat. I mean, that's the bottom line. It doesn't offer a lot after that point. And yeah, I'm the same way with McKinley. He's on my list, but it's like just because almost there's just no. It's all 3 techs in this draft, really.
Yeah, Jordan Jefferson cranked out like 34 reps on the bench, which was by far the most of anybody this year. So I think he might slot in as a pretty decent nose. But yeah, it's luckily it's not a position that you really need to think about all that hard these days.
No, no, definitely not. And hopefully maybe they can find something in free agency if it's not Devondre.
Mhm. All right. Defensive ends now. And again, we're thinking about things from a 3-4 perspective. So the defensive ends are like your Leonard Williams and Draymond Jones, not the Uchenna Nwosu, Boye Mafes, right?
Right. That's right.
Right.
Yes.
So that being the case, defensive ends, my top 5: Jerzon Newton, Byron Murphy, Chris Jenkins, Braden Fisk, and Rook Orohoror. And your top 5 was Jerzon Newton, Byron Murphy, Tyler Davis, Leonard Taylor, and Mekhi Wingo. So we differentiated a pretty good amount at the end here. So you had Tyler Davis 3. What do you like about Tyler Davis so far?
Unique first step quickness, some ability to play between the 1 and the 3 tech. Like how he wins the leverage war. Just think I think he's a solid player with upside there in the second round. Really nice rip move. He's 6'2", so he's a little bit smaller. That's how he gets that leverage win most of the time. Even if his initial move is stymied, doesn't have a lot of a counter, so he's got some stuff to develop on his game. But I just like the versatility, and I think he gets you quick wins from the 3 tech or 4-eye defensive end, however you want to call it on this. So I like that part of it versus some of the other guys.
Yeah, and you also had Mekhi Wingo here, which that's an interesting one. I remember we both liked him a lot before the season, and then he barely played this year. I think he got hurt and never came back. But the stuff that we liked is still there. I think you compared him to this might have been the guy you compared to Brandon Mebane before
I
the
did.
season started.
Yeah, 6', 284. So he's probably a little bit lighter than Mebane coming out, but I think that he has a lot of Mebane's initial first step quickness. Another guy a little bit like Tyler Davis, where he's 6 feet tall. So it's a lot of like Mebane did, where he can naturally creates the leverage win with the first step quickness to where he's off the snap before you can get out of your stance as an offensive lineman. And then he's winning leverage up on you because he's 6 foot at the same time. So he gets the early win into the snap, puts offensive linemen into recovery more often than not. Just like him. I think a lot of these 3 techs for me, Brendan, when it came to it, these are all a pile of guys to me. If I was to be honest with you, when we get past Byron Murphy and Zerzon Newton, you could take Tyler Davis, Leonard Taylor, Wingo, Michael Hall, Chris Jenkins, Braden Fisk, and probably just about throw them all together in about the same pile as far as upside potential. It's in varying ways, and they've got different attributes and strengths and pluses and minuses, but I think they all do fall very, very, very close together.
Yeah, I do think that's fair. Like, I wasn't a big fan of somebody like a Michael Hall, admittedly. I think that I would put some of these guys ahead of him for sure. But Leonard Taylor, the Miami guy, he was a guy I really liked before the season started, and it didn't feel like he had a great year. But, some of that stuff I liked with him still exists. Is there something you saw with him that made you put him this high?
Another guy that's more attributes with him. And again, it's just like you said, there's some stuff here where I'm unsure on some of these guys. I think what you just kind of covered is where a lot of this was at this year, where a lot of guys came in this year where some of the tape might have been better last year than this seasons of tape. But another guy where the testing numbers didn't show this, but very good first step quickness off of the snap, which gets him early wins. A good single gapping type guy you could bring onto your defense. But yeah, there's a little bit of an underwhelming slant on some of these guys coming in here. I mean, this is why we don't, for instance, I don't have one first round grade on one single defensive tackle in this draft. And while I've got a good number on the second and third round grades, even some of that is a little bit of the projectable upside of what they bring from a skill set standpoint versus production actually necessarily is the bottom line. It's a little bit like Mason Smith, right? Mason Smith was that freak show we thought was going to come out this year. Another LSU guy. Didn't come close. Didn't come close to the level of play we thought we were going to get out of him.
Right. Yeah. And it seems like he's been completely forgotten about now. Like, I don't see nothing about him at this point. Anything combine wise with this crew that impressed you? Like Braden Fisk had the awesome combine, right? Like anything like he goes without saying, kind of. He was awesome.
I didn't think that in looking at the combine times, there was many guys, Nelson Caesar out of Houston's kind of an interesting cat a little bit with some of the times he posted, but there was some uninspiring stuff overall, especially from the standpoint of the 10-yard split, Brendan. A lot of like sub 1.8 time 10-yard splits. Marshawn Nealon's an interesting one, I think. We've
Mm,
met with him. Hard to find much tape on Western Michigan. So I watched just kind of one, thing. He's sort of a one trick pony where he's sort of just trying to tackling dummy you on the bull rush, right? So it's like the tackling dummy where they're stacking it up.
mhm,
And then I'll go over here, and that's his one thing he kind of does. But he's really like a high energy, plays with his hair on fire kind of guy from the how he plays at the position in there as 4-3 kind of end. He can stand up as a spinner inside, got some versatility with him. He tested pretty good, 4.75, 1.66. So he gave you a little bit of that. But I mean, everybody else, Gabe Baylor, 1.72, 10-yard split, 31.5-inch vertical leap. Jaden Crumby, 4.97, 1.69, sub 1.7 to 1.8. Marcus Harris, 1.77, 10-yard split, 30-inch vert. I think that there's just some underwhelming stuff. Even Dwayne Carter, a guy that I've got some slight comps to, like a Jaron Reed. I thought 4.99, 1.72 at 300 pounds. 32-inch vert, just kind of average numbers, not bad numbers, Brendan, but just average numbers. Numbers that don't necessarily, along with what you've seen on the tape with these guys. And in Crumbly's case, Hall's case, Marcus Harris's case, you go, even Dwayne Carter, it's like, well, you give me pass rush, but I don't know if I could trust you in the run. So there's some holes here on some of these guys. There's some question marks, and maybe not where the value will be in this draft to be picking if you're talking about second and third round, even though I've got some second, third round grades on these guys versus other positions.
right. One thing that the combine did this year that I really liked is when they overlay two guys going through the obstacle course at the same time, like they did Braden Fisk and Byron Murphy, I think it was. And you can see how much more fluid Fisk is moving through the dummies that he's like slapping to the side, how much more efficient he is with his movement. I thought that was really cool. I hope they keep doing that going forward. It highlighted how good Fisk was at moving efficiently.
Agreed. Yeah, no, definitely. It doesn't lie then when you're going back to back on two prospects, where you can really see it clearly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, Fisk still has the freaking T-Rex arms, 31-inch arms. So I'm not saying I'm in love with him now, but I do think that he's ascended up my board for sure at this point with a performance like that.
He's a fun player, man. The tough thing is the arms get him into trouble. And that's the part where you pair it into the tape where the short arms, at times he loses that ability to get his hands on first contact, and first contact's on him, and he can't get his little fingers out there to the chest plate. And he gets swallowed up at times whole. And you can even feel him still giving maximum effort where he's being thrown to the ground, but he's still trying to throw half of his body at the ball carrier. A lot of that. I mean, he gives you everything he's got on the football field, no doubt. And I like him, but I worry about that arm length being a real inhibiting factor for him on the inside.
Mm-hmm. There was one other thing. Oh yeah, Chris Jenkins. Is there something that's kind of pushing you away from him? You didn't have him in your top 5. Is there something you don't like?
Don't think he's got much pass rushing upside. What is the value of a 3-tuck run stuffer, Brendan? And no, undoubtedly, really good run stuffing, really good. But what's that value?
Yeah, that is a problem.
I just don't see, when I've gone back and watched tape a couple times, I don't see a lot that he's bringing or supplying as far high effort, high energy, to give you everything. He's got another one of those guys, but just doesn't have any real exceptional moves he brings or plan of attack or an upside I see there as far as some sort of quickness or something he's got that allow him to kind of measure up in that.
All right. Linebackers up next. Inside linebackers here. Definitely an area we're going to have to address hard. Maybe multiple picks in this draft, I would say. My top 5 goes Edgerrin Cooper 1, Junior Colson 2, Peyton Wilson 3, Cedric Gray 4, Jeremiah Trotter Jr. 5. And you went number 1, Junior Colson, number 2, Edgerrin Cooper, number 3, Jeremiah Trotter Jr., number 4, Michael Barrett, and number 5, Peyton Wilson. So definitely some overlap, but that 1-2 is tough, man. That Junior Colson, Edgerrin Cooper, that's a tough evaluation for me.
Yeah, it's hard. They're both neck and neck, that's for sure.
Yeah, I kind of feel like Cooper's better, but I feel like Colson might fit this team better, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think they're so close, it's it's win by a nose kind of thing. I feel a little bit more safer going to Colson because of the fit. I just also just think he's got something about him and the way he goes about his business that stands out to me, and it wins me over. He's also been starting since basically freshman year. I just it ends up winning me over enough to where, as much as I like Colson Cooper's upside, and it's readily apparent, they're number 1 and 2 by I think a wide margin over the guys behind him. Just too good to, and going back and watching Colson, just too good.
Right. So Trotter was a tough one to evaluate for me. I did end up putting him at 5. I noticed that you seem to have put him up at 3 here. So did Trotter impress you down the stretch of the season? Because I remember we both kind of thought that the start of the season for him was underwhelming.
Yeah, I was. I think he's turned it around a little bit as the year went along. He made some plays in coverage. He still ended up, I think, rounding out the season as far as the tackling numbers go. His testing numbers were nice at the combine with the short shuttle, but short shows off some of that bounce and lateral abilities. The 7.133 cone, which is, I think, pretty good as well for a guy at 230. He came in at 230 and 6 feet. I was worried about him, Brendan, coming in at 5'10 and 225, 220. 230 is still a little bit light, but at least at that 6 foot size, 31.5-inch arms, he got those things were my worries coming in the combine, and he checked that off for me. I think as a player, he's got natural ability and instincts out on the football field. He should slide in, be able to start for you, and be able to be a solid player for you. I don't think he's got star potential, but solid starter level potential that you get late second round. Yes.
Yeah, and I want to say that I know Cedric Gray didn't test great, but I think he tested good enough for me to still consider him to be covetable in this draft.
Yeah.
There was some concern he was going to run like a 4.7. He ran like a 4.63, I want to say.
It's the
4.64.
159. The 159 is the important one, right?
Yeah.
That's because on him, what he does best is it's like his zone drops are what sets him apart from almost any linebacker in this draft. His ability to get from here to there really quickly and take away a real fast route. And it's to a specific spot in the zone because he's got a nice feel. And that's that quickness of the 159 you'll feel when he wants to get to here to there, he can do it. And that's what you need in linebackers, is that little bit of that juice like that.
Mm-hmm. So outside of the top guys, did anybody kill the combine at the linebacker position for you? I got a couple names.
Okay. Start out.
I mean, I don't want to say kill it, but impressed me. First guy, a guy we met with, Trevin Wallace, the Kentucky guy. He ran fast. He jumped well. Overall, it was a really good combine. Started looking into him a little bit, and I was mostly impressed with what I saw. The 1.62 10-yard split is a little concerning, but overall, I think he made some money. And I would also go with a guy who I watched basically every snap of him play over the last several years, Edufan Ulofoshio, who I was not really viewing as a draftable guy, but he came in at 236 pounds running a 4.56 40. I think that's going to cut it. So Olufoshio might be a late round option here that I could get behind.
I don't think he's a late round option with those testing numbers, my guy. Go look at Dayon Henley and where he went last year, and the testing numbers he went up and put up against Edifon, and you're looking at very similar numbers across the board. So historically speaking, this guy goes in the 3rd round, late 3rd round, but he's going to go in the 3rd round. Yeah,
that is an ascension because I didn't think he was going to get drafted, and then he had that combine, and I'm like, wait a minute.
He's been playing for many years there, UW, and starting for many years. So this isn't a flash in the pan guy that just gives you 1 year of production. I know that the injuries are somewhat of a problematic thing, and we'll see if medicals knock him down. But as you said about the size numbers, 6'1", 32 and 7/8, and almost 33-inch long arms, and 159 10-yard split. These are really good numbers. These aren't just decent, like, no, these are really, really good numbers for the position. I think he's going to ascend into that spot of things when it's all said and done.
Yeah. Also might throw Curtis Jacobs out there. It feels like every year Penn State has these players that just slaughter the combine despite not looking that good in college. Like Micah Parsons has become so much more than he was in college. Theo Johnson looks like he's going to be like that. I thought Curtis Jacobs is kind of in that vein too. 159 10-yard split there. And he was not that great of a player in college too. He was somebody I kept an eye on and was just waiting to be impressed by. So maybe he's up there too.
Yeah, I agree. I haven't looked at a lot of his tape, but he tested well.
All right. And anything else?
Nope. I think Peyton Wilson got himself back in with the short arms, got himself overcome on the short arms a little bit. He's definitely going side 3, and he might have pushed himself into 2 with what he did. 4-4-3,
Yeah.
1-5-4, 10-yard split.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one thing I want to say about the short arm thing, because I said the short arm thing a few weeks ago, and a few people would say things like, well, Luke Kuechly had 31-inch arms or something like that. And it's like, one thing that I want to say about that is, we know some people manage to overcome it. That doesn't change the fact that it's something to be overcome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and it's also that NFL teams don't draft inside 3 rounds guys that have short arms. I mean, you can get mad at us about it, but it's also the way the NFL teams operate. You have 30.5-inch arms. There's 3 guys in the last 20 years that have been selected in the first 3 rounds at the middle linebacker position that have that size of arms. So it's also, we got to be students of history on this a little bit too. And the NFL has a little bit of a predilection leaning against it.
All right, so now we're going to do edge rushers. Again, another position I don't think the Seahawks are going to attack very aggressively, but it's a pretty nice crop, nevertheless. Fun to watch, fun to keep an eye on here.
Mm-hmm.
I think ours are almost identical, by the way. There was a lot of synergy here. I went with Dallas Turner 1, Leatu Latu 2, Jared Verse 3, Chop Robinson 4, Darius Robinson 5. And you went Dallas Turner 1, Jared Verse 2, Latu 3, Chop Robinson 4, Darius Robinson 5. So the only difference we had was we switched Verse and Latu, which admittedly I'd change my mind on that one every damn day anyway. So
that's what that's the draft process, Brendan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I feel like that combine made Dallas Turner clearly the best defender in this draft for me.
Yeah, I did too as well. He's a well-rounded player. He's not up at Will Anderson's kind of place where Will was coming out of the same program last year, but they've got some similarities in their build and their style, and they play stronger than their build. But he's locked in at this point. The Hawks have met with him, so he is a possible guy in play if you think about that meeting with it, and a guy that I think if you look through the draft, Brendan, as far as the likelihood of the way this draft plays out at the front of it, especially if 5 quarterbacks happen to get taken inside of our picks. Really good chance that from a value standpoint, you might end up with Dallas Turner as your value guy sitting there at 16.
Yeah, and I'll have zero complaints if Dallas Turner's there at 16 and we take him.
I mean, you get the number 1 edge in the draft at 16.
I know it's going to be a riot in my chat, by the way. I can tell you that now. It's going to be a riot, but the dude is just way too good.
I agree. But this is the value based. When you go value, this is what happens sometimes. You end up in that road, and people will be mad about it, but that's what value-based drafting will get you. And it's for the betterment of the team at the end of the day. Just got to trust in that. Trust the process.
Mm-hmm. So Chop Robinson was interesting. He had the killer 40 time and 10-yard split. His jumps were pretty good, but he's got those 32.5-inch arms. It's not great. Like everything else was money, but his arms are like 6th percentile. What do you think of Chop? Because there's been a lot of discourse about him the last couple weeks.
He's Will McDonald. Do you remember Will McDonald out of Iowa State last year?
Wasn't he like a 25-year-old or something?
I don't recall on the age, but just hyper athletic, really just I think he probably had a little bit longer arms than Chop, but 32.5 is not bad. It's as long as you're over the 32, you're in decent territory. But he's just a hyper athletic guy with not much of a plan of attack, and he can bend and he can dip and he can do a lot of the traditional things you want from the pass rushers. But he just doesn't have a plan of attack. He doesn't have counter moves. It does know how to really use his hands very well. He's the Ricky Bobby. I don't know what to do with my hands. But he's really, really, really explosive, uniquely so in this draft, right there with Verse, I think, in that explosiveness off the snap to the bend. And that part had to raise him in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Any kind of later round sleepers at edge that caught your attention via their combine performance?
I've got him up higher on my list right now, but a guy like a Javon Solomon, I know he didn't have he had an okay combine, I think. But he's a guy that's kind of been as a maybe a late round guy. Eventually you kind of take a look at a little bit. I know he didn't have the great 10-yard split, but guy that might dip down a little bit, that on tape's got some sort of Uchenna Nwosu vibes that I get off of him, a little bit. So yeah, we're talking about edge, right?
Yeah.
Sure.
Another guy, the guy from Troy, right? He's the Troy guy.
Yeah, he's the Troy guy, kind of the smaller school guy there. Another guy that I haven't had a chance to look at the tape, but there's actually two guys that I'm have as my next guys I'm looking to get on the tape to check out who posted some interesting times. That's Miles Cole first at Texas Tech.
Mm-hmm.
At 6'6", 278, almost 37-inch long arms.
Oh,
37-inch long arms, running a 4.67. And I kind of look at it, Brendan. I'm like, how does the guy last year with the same kind of build, same kind of times? I know he put up a couple more sacks, maybe. That guy goes top 10. This guy's being looked at as kind of a back end guy, kind of giving you the same dimensions, right? From who was that guy last year that went? And it's like, it's kind of, and then remember the guy at Texas Tech that went to the Raiders?
you're Tyree?
Yeah. Was it
Tyree Wilson? Yeah.
Tyree Wilson. Kind of some similar metrics of Tyree a little bit, but he's fun. And then Mohamed Kamara at Colorado State, 6'1", 248, did a 1.58 10-yard split, 23 reps on the bench in addition. So gave you a little bit of power with the explosiveness. Another guy that I'm looking forward to taking a look at his tape and seeing what he might have to provide coming off the combine.
Yeah. I took note of Cedric Johnson, the Mississippi guy, could kind of following in the footsteps of Sam Williams, maybe. I think he might end up going in a similar area of the draft potentially. He had a really nice combine, 38-inch vert, 10-foot 2-inch broad, 25 bench press reps as an edge player, 260, so might not be a great fit for the 3-4, but I think he's good. And he also had Jalix Hunt. He was somebody the Seahawks met with, 34.5-inch arms, 252 pounds, 4.64, 1.6 10-yard split. Not superstar numbers, of course, but I was pretty impressed with his athleticism as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Cedric's an interesting guy. He's generated 73 pressures in the last 3 years, 16 sacks. So some pretty good production for him. He's a little bit of a labored get off. Doesn't have kind of the twitchiness you might look for, but can't find the tape on Jalix. He's a small, tiny, itty bitty school. So just no tape available.
One of the players' moms holding a camcorder in the stands.
Exactly. Yeah. It's an iPhone camera that's not zoomed in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sometimes that's the best you can do, though. I remember trying to find a Derek Young footage a few years ago.
Oh, yeah. It gets tough. I remember, yeah. Denor Lenore, we always had that highlight video, that wonderful, wonderful highlight video.
Board Skyler, thank you for the $9.99 super chat. Turner or Bowers, in the highly unlikely case they are both available. Thanks for the content. Always look forward to you two having a conversation. All right. So Turner or Bowers if they're both there.
Bowers.
I agree. I think Bowers is the better player.
Bowers is one of my board Skyler. He's one of my blue chip players in the draft. While Turner is, I think at this point, the best edge in the draft and has solidified himself in that way, he's not a blue chip prospect. And for me, blue chip is the difference between blue chip or a guy you're taking in the first round who's still highly talented to me is one guy's got star potential. One guy can be an all pro potential. The other guy can be an upper level starter in this league potential. Those are my two caveats between the two. So I would go to Bowers.
To me, Bowers is a top 5 player in this draft. I don't understand why he falls to 16 if he does.
He just didn't come in at the 6'4.5", 6'5", 265 doing what he did. He did it at 6'3", and it's got people like worried. But I agree with you. I'm in the same place you are with it, where I think that it's some of these evaluations. I think just guys get too much time on their hands to pick things apart. It's like it's easy at first. You just see it, you know it. Nope, I got this read. I know what this guy is. And then you get longer and longer in the process and you pick away. But I don't know how you can look at the other tight ends in this draft and look at Bowers and not see, first, even the other tight ends we've seen through the last few years and see the difference in what he brings to the table in the field.
I don't think there's ever been a tight end prospect like Bowers. I think he might be the best ever.
Geez,
like I'm thinking about the top ones of all time, like Kellen Winslow, TJ Hawkinson, Eric Ebron, Kyle Pitts. Some people say Jeremy Shockey. He ended up kind of falling a little bit out of the top 10 though. To me, I look at Bowers and I'm like, I think this is better than anything I've ever seen before.
It might be. I have heard people making comps to Kellen Winslow Jr. with him, as far as like, if you're looking like, here's what does he actually comp out to? We can't really go to Bauer. We can't go to Gronk because Gronk's just too big and way too freakish on what he was. But It may very well be the case. I haven't given that a lot of thought on where it would go all the time, but I do think he's in the best one we've seen at the very least in the last 5 to 6 to 7 years. And does that make it to me a no-brainer to take that guy at 16 overall in the NFL draft? You betcha at that point. And you can squawk about, but you're paying him because people go, well, you're going to be paying him the salary. It means you shouldn't. I had people tell me you shouldn't pick him at 16 because you have to pay that first round salary. And the whole point of having the tight end is to keep it cheap. It's like, I don't care. He's good enough to pay at that rate, pay it, and you'll be happy with it.
Yeah, he does it all. He does it all.
Yeah.
Okay, moving along now to cornerback, another position I haven't spent a ton of time on because duh. But nevertheless, I do have a top 5 here. Number 1, Quinyon Mitchell. Number 2, Nate Wiggins. Number 3, Terrion Arnold. Number 4, Kool-Aid McKinstry. And number 5, Cooper DeJean. And the Hawks Nest has number 1, Quinyon Mitchell. Number 2, Kool-Aid. Number 3, Cooper DeJean. Number 4, Terrion Arnold. And number 5, Nate Wiggins. So it's the same players, just in a little bit of a different order. So, yeah, just I feel like Quinyon Mitchell's combine really solidified him. I was very impressed.
He's the only blue chip defensive player I now have in the draft, and his combine solidified me to make him the only blue chip player in the draft. Back-to-back seasons as the number 1 graded cornerback by PFF in college football. An absolute interception machine, ball skills for days. And then he went out there and showed you at the combine testing out at the 1.43. And I was worried he's going to run like maybe a 4.5 or something. It's just gonna be all this. He's just a player, he's just got ball skills and sense out there for what he's doing. But no, he gives you the twitchiness in addition to that. I love his feistiness at the corner position, his competitiveness at the corner position. Ball skills as good as I've seen coming out, it feels like, in maybe a couple of years for the position. Love him. Love what he brings to the table.
Yeah, I really like what Quinyon Mitchell is. And I'll tell you, if he's there at 16, I don't know how we take him. Maybe we take him and then flip Woolen for like a 3rd round pick. That's probably what it would take. But I wouldn't be angry about doing that because I think that Mitchell and Witherspoon would just be beyond locked down for the next decade.
That'd be tough to deal with, man. They would be very hard to deal with. And I agree. He's that good to me a talent in this draft. So if you, again, back to that, if you got a blue chip guy at 16, you're grabbing because it's such a low likelihood that that guy will be available to us at 16. Because I have only 10 guys in this draft that have that grade.
Right.
Then you got to jump, I think, at that point on them.
Beyond the top guys, Max Melton, I thought had a really nice combine, and I'm starting to really like him a lot. Yes, it is Bo Melton's brother.
Yes.
And he ran a 4.39, 151 with massive jumps, 40.5-inch vert, 11-foot-4-inch broad. Dude's a crazy good athlete. And I think he's kind of solidified himself as I don't want to say day 2 pick, but I think he'll get close.
I think he's a late day 2 pick at this point. He's a late 3rd round pick to me. But I'll admit there wasn't a lot of Rutgers defense. I could only find like a couple games on Rutgers defense to do much of an evaluation on him.
Yeah, that is a little bit tough sometimes. Any combine standouts to you beyond the top guys at corner?
No, I think to the bad side, Kalen King probably dropped himself out of 4.61. He did get the 1.54, but he's put himself into that 5th round range. Just a lot of good, solid times, I think, in this combine. 4.5 guys where they were in that 4.4 range of things, but just you feel pretty good about what they were bringing from the, your Cam Hart types to your Josh Newtons to your Kyrie Jacksons. It's a lot of good value here in the 3rd or 4th round. Chaw Smith Wade out of Washington State, I thought had a pretty good combine with his 4.54, 1.55, and he's got really good tape in addition to that coming out of WSU. Ennis Rakestraw, he's a guy that I comp out to a former UW Marcus Peters. So another guy, 4.51, 1.54, 10-yard split. Smaller, thinner corner like Peters was, just super competitive and feisty. He's got that kind of nature to him. Another guy like Peters, where best is an off coverage guy who just kind of attacks off coverage, not a press guy, but in that other way of things. So Dwight McGlothern, 4.47, 1.5, 10-yard split. Second highest rated corner by PFF last year, just a pure cover corner with ball skills, but a little bit of shorter arms at 6'2", only 30.5-inch long arms. So there's some pretty good performances across the board corner-wise. We got a very deep cornerback draft here. Very deep.
It is. Feels like every draft lately is deep on corners.
It does. Yeah. This one's been definitely And if I might say, there's been some people out there that are trying to talk about this draft like it's not a strong draft. I got to say, I disagree with it. It may not have star power to it, but it does have a lot of deepness to it, a lot of good value within it.
I do think it's top heavy. I think that would be fair to say.
Through the first 3.5 rounds, I'd say that's a fair thing, but it's a good 3.5 rounds.
Mm-hmm. One other guy that I would shout out would be Mike Sanritzel from Michigan. I probably mispronounced his last name, but he's the former wide receiver. The combine wasn't stellar, although he did jump 40 inches and go 10-11 on his broad. His 20-yard shuttle was really good too, 4.01. But he was a guy who's like very cerebral back there. Washington receivers were talking about how Sanritzel was like calling out routes before the play and constantly ruining what they were trying to do in the national title game. So he's a guy who might be pretty interesting as a more late round, maybe late day 2, early day 3 guy for his cerebral elements as a corner.
I do like him a lot. I have him in the 4th round right now as far as my set. He is a pure slot guy. So and he's got a little bit of the Quandre Diggs kind of build to him at 5'9", 182. So it's in that kind of same mode where quick and he'll chop guys down, but he can't come up there and grab you and play. He's got to kind of get underneath you to take you down. But he's a playmaker for the position, Brendan. And I think if you're getting the best slot specialist in this draft, you want to talk about that. Who's the best slot specialist? Here's your guy. This is your best one. But I don't think that he's going to be able to provide you safety upside because he's going to be too small to do that.
Right. That makes sense. He is like 5'8" or something. There are some issues there for sure, but very intriguing player from a cerebral standpoint, I think.
Back-to-back solid years of production too. So you know what you're getting with him. And yeah, almost 11 feet on for 5'9", jumping 11 feet off the broad. That shows you 401 on the shuttle. He's got legitimate short area quickness and explosiveness. I mean, that's absolute.
He was playing receiver until 2 years ago, I think, too. So he could get better easily.
I could see it. I do think he's limited to the slot, though.
All right. Just one area left. It's safety. And I did divide things up into free safety and strong safety. But one thing to keep in mind for the audience, it doesn't really matter in this defense. Both guys are going to be asked to do similar things. It's just kind of a way to separate the list out rather than, the free safety has to do this and the strong safety has to do that. It doesn't matter so much anymore. So that being said, strong safety, I went number 1, Tyler Nubbin, number 2, Bew Braid, number 3, James Williams, number 4, Jaden Hicks, number 5, Ketan Oladapo. And the Hawks Nest went Tyler Nubbin, 1, James Williams, 2, Ketan Oladapo, 3, Jaden Hicks, 4, Malik Mustafa, 5.
Braid went back to school, by the way.
Oh, dang. Oh. That breaks my heart.
At least you're getting clipped by these too.
All right, then I don't know. Bump over the guy who doesn't believe in space.
There you
go. He jumped 12 feet. He did a 12-foot broad jump.
Who was that?
The guy who doesn't believe in planets. I think his name was Taylor Demerson. No, wait a minute. Let me try to get the name right here. I don't want to besmirch somebody for not believing in outer space and then get it wrong. Oh, Tyler Owens.
Oh, there we go. I was gonna say, man, not my Demerson. I have him as I just moved Demerson in my 5th free safety today. So I was like, not him. No.
Yeah. So yeah, we both love Nubbin. I think Nubbin is a 1st-round pick. I would be totally cool trading back into the back end of the 1st and getting him.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just basically perfect for this defense too, by the way. He does it all.
Oh yeah. Perfect ideal safety. The only 1st-round safety I have in the entire draft right now.
Yeah. I thought Kinchins was a disaster. I'm sorry, not Kinchins, excuse me. I thought that James Williams at the combine, they're teammates. That's why I got them confused. James Williams, I mean, it's going to be tough for him to fit into this defense. He is such a Cam Chancellor type. Him running a 4.65 40. I know it makes sense because he's heavier. He's 231. He's literally a linebacker. But that's going to be tough in this defense, don't you think?
I think at the end of the day, it's a bit of a guess, but I think he eventually gets moved to linebacker when it's all said and done. Yes. I still think that if you're taking him in the 2nd round as a linebacker, Well, just look at his times versus the other linebackers we have in this draft. Look at the size of him versus the other linebackers in this draft. It's like, um, it'd be perfectly fine for what he's bringing at that point, those numbers and where he's at. But I do think that that's probably where you eventually do it. There's probably some multifaceted stuff though there too. Could he play the Hamilton role? Maybe. Safeties don't have to be terribly fast. The 1.59 10-yard split is the part that I think will help him out for a guy that, will do a lot of short area stuff. But 30-inch vert, 9.9 broad. There's some other lack of explosives there. It's just that 1.59 is the only thing you got to really lean on.
Right. Oladapo is a guy I feel like people are sleeping on right now. He's pretty low down in these big boards, like 6th round or so.
I agree.
Feels like he's better than that, doesn't it?
I just really liked his tape a lot. 293 snaps out of the box, 278 snaps out of the slot, 174 snaps at free safety. So absolutely used all over the place at the college level. Loved his run fits. Maybe not a ton of ball skills there with him, but it gets you a couple picks. Just a good overall solid player to me. Maybe not a lot of sizzle, but just a solid down the line.
Mm-hmm. And the one sleeper I had here would actually be another Husky, Dominic Hampton. He tested surprisingly well. This was another guy that I didn't think was draftable, but he's got good size to him. He's got good arm length. He ran a 4.51. He jumped well. It's I don't know. A lot of these Huskies impressed me at this combine.
Didn't catch him much on my replay of him too much, but he's a guy on my list to take a look at for sure. Very interested in Hampton, what he brings.
Yeah, it was a very interesting combine for the Huskies. Like, he had Braylon Trice doing whatever that was, which I don't even know if I'd take him in the 2nd round now. I don't know. That was ugly.
I bumped him down 2nd, but he's dipping at this point. You know what I mean? He's dipping. It's, yeah. You knew there was going to be a struggle with him testing. You knew he was not going to be, but it didn't give you quite as much of the legitimate numbers as
right.
You'd like.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's about it for strong safety. So free safety is the last position. Mm-hmm. And I went number 1, Kalen Bullock, number 2, Javon Bullard, number 3, Cameron Kinchins, number 4, Sione Vaki, and 5, Josh Proctor. And you had, let's see here, Cameron Kinchins 1, Kalen Bullock 2, Javon Bullard 3, Malachi Moore 4, and Sione Vaki 5. So a little bit of difference here, but not radically so. I felt like that combine was kind of a disaster for Kinchins, didn't you?
It wasn't great, but you know what I went back and did is the guy that he reminds me of, and it's one that you struggle to give him as a comp necessarily, is the Ed Reed comp, Brendan. And so I was like, well, I mean, maybe he's really far off where Ed Reed was on his testing numbers and what he brought. But if you go put them side by side, their numbers are startlingly the same, on top of the fact that their tape matches up to each other. And I walk away from that kind of scratching and going, man, this is where I got to trust my eval of the tape then. I mean, if Ed Reed could go out there and do what he did, not necessarily testing through the roof, and I would have thought Ed Reed was like a 4.4 guy or something when he came out, right? Like, he was just, because that's what he felt like on the field. But no, he didn't actually give you those kind of numbers. And so with Kitchens, he is a do-it-all player. He gives you ball skills. He gives you a willingness to come up and be hit. You're probably going to have to be one of those guys you tell him to back off a little bit because he's just so violent with it, so willing to put his nose in there and make it happen. But I love his overall skill set. 2nd round guy that I have on him for it, but really good player. What got you putting Bullard up so high on your line? And I like Bullard, but
yeah, I put Bullard up so well. I have him at 2, you have him at 3, but
right.
I just felt more like Kinchins fell rather than Bullard went up. But I like Bullard's versatility. He did all kinds of stuff for that Georgia defense. I think he'll be a good fit in this defense. I was impressed with his ball skills. So there is a lot of stuff I like about Bullard, but more than anything, I felt like Kinchins just fell, and I think Bullock is versatile enough to play in this defense as well. I don't know how you feel about that. Some people were calling him kind of like a pure free safety. I don't feel like that's necessarily the book on him yet.
I don't know if it's a book on him either. I mean, he's a big dude, so you certainly do like from his standpoint, and he's a little bit more of a cover guy in the way that's what he's brought. So can he go to strong safety? Well, 6'2", he's got some stuff. He's got to build the work off of to where that could be some of his upside. He has been more of a free safety, pure out there, just kind of ball hawk guy, but I think he can get it done too. I like him, and I think he could make it happen. He's a really good player, and the USC problems defensively weren't really related as much to him.
hmm And let's see here. There was one guy we both left off of here who tested well. Neither of us had Cole Bishop, who had a really nice combine until they measured his arms. So where are you with Cole Bishop right now?
I did have a chance to scout him. Cole Bishop is a 4th round graded guy for me.
Mhm.
He's a box safety credited last year by PFF as having more snaps at the free safety position. Really strong blitzer, best down around the line of scrimmage. And I mean, like, next to the edge at the line of scrimmage, right? And the further you get him away from it, the worse it is. Can he play split safety? Looks at that point. Well, if you looked at the snap counts, you'd say yes. Watching him on the field, I say no. And I've got to be honest with you, I'm kind of anti UDOT defenders after we've gone down that road a couple times with guys who've just not been tremendously successful. I know the whole rep is that Utah's got these great defense and they're just but I don't know if I feel their defenders at the NFL level really as much, and especially guys we've had kind of coming through here. Both Utah safeties, I'm a little bit light on. We have Vaki on there.
Mm-hmm.
Are we really sure Vaki's best position isn't running back?
That would be an interesting transition.
I mean, you look at what he did at college, and I watched his tape in college, and I mean, I kind of liked more of what he did there than what he did as a safety, to be honest with you.
Oh, two-way player. All right, we're going back to the 1950s here.
Well, I mean, he had, let me see here, 42 carries for 317 yards and a 7.5 yard per average per carry.
Well, I guess if he falls through at safety, at least you know what to do with him.
He could always be your 4th running back, I suppose, if you needed to. But both guys got some holes in their game. Both guys are a little out of control at times and not the most sound of tacklers in the open field. But he doesn't do a lot free safety wise. Does he want to give me? He's okay back there. You know, he has some plays. It more as it just gets kind of weak as you get to the depths of the 4th and the 5th for me. I actually put Dondren. The guy that's rose up my list is watching him today was the Darian Taylor Demerson.
Oh,
he'd be my 5th free safety now.
Yeah, he's good. He's a little bit lighter. He's sub 200, but I think it can work.
I do too. He was a fun player.
Mm-hmm. Let's see here. I think that's about it for the players. We did get Upo. Thank you for the $10. Great discussion. Love listening to you guys. Just showing support. If Senritzel is calling out your playbook, Grubb better pay attention to that. I have worries about this experiment.
It's a good point. And it's a good point. It's not a good sign to have called out by it. There are smart players that come along that just are on it and they see it and they've done the film study and you know, they're on all the P's and Q's of it, but it's definitely worrisome a little bit. I'd give you that for sure, Upo. It's not ideal to hear that.
Mm-hmm. All right. So, I mean, I imagine that we're kind of married to this experiment for at least a couple years here. But I am very aware of the fact that the Grubb thing could go spectacularly wrong. Like, this is not some ultra safe hire. Like, you could have gotten somebody like, what was the name of that old Lions coach who always looked the same on the sideline no matter what? He coached the Colts to the Super Bowl when they lost to the Saints.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. I can't remember.
Jim Caldwell. Yeah, it's not somebody like that, but I don't mind taking the risk. I'll say it. I don't mind it at all.
I don't either on this one, Upo. I think you're right about it being, again, the risk is there. Like Brendan says, I wouldn't push that away as ever. This was a boom bust hire. That's what it was. And there are hires you can take that are a little more middle of the road and safe and sound and you feel good. I'd even offer, Brendan said 2 years. I think you can do it by 1 year. If it's 1 year in, you got players calling out the plays and he's over his head and over his skis, then, you know, that's then you move off from a year and you get a new guy in. I mean, that's coordinators you're not married to. So, but I think it will work fine. That was one game. There's a lot of other games where he was absolutely prolific, both at Fresno State and at University of Washington. And that Michigan defense was as good a defense as you'd find in all of college football last year.
Yeah, and you know, at a certain point, I guess there's only so much you can do when your quarterback doesn't play well under pressure, and you have a defense on the other side that is going to generate pressure. It's tough. Yeah. And Gino showed last year he deals with pressure quite well, I think. So If you're looking at it from that perspective, then I'm a little less worried about it. But life is a series of events where you figure out what the best thing to do is. You acknowledge the fact that you doing it is still risky, but then you do it anyway because it's the right thing to do.
That's right. Absolutely. And I think there's some legit upside to grab as a coach here, as a play caller.
All right, so I think that's it for the show tonight. I think that's we got through everything we wanted to do. We've laid down a foundation for draft stuff. We talked about the combine. I think we're feeling pretty good about our level of preparedness going into the 2024 NFL draft. So thank you for coming out tonight, Brandon.
My pleasure, brother.
Mm-hmm. Thank you to everybody who came out to the stream tonight. It was great audience, great crowd tonight. We will be doing this again next week. We're going to do it a few days into free agency. So by the time we meet again, we'll have a much better idea of what the team is going to look like for 2024. I'm going to be doing like all day streams all week next week.
Awesome.
For free agency.
Let's go.
I'm sure you're going to be streaming some during free agency as well.
I will be doing some as well. So let's get it.
All right. So definitely check both of it out. I will be on Twitch later tonight. We are doing things a little bit differently tonight. We're doing anime watch along night, pick up from episode 7 of Neon Genesis Evangelion. And if that sounds interesting to you, show up and we will be back. We will be back in, I think, 5 days. We're going to do it Thursday, right?
We'll do it Thursday unless something pops up. If we get something breaking news, we'll jump on it.
I think all the news to break has been broken pretty much at this point. I don't think there's a lot else to squeeze out, but you never know. You never know.
It could be day one, Wilkins, Patrick Queen, Leonard Williams, They just go hog wild.
18-year contracts, so the cap hits are like...
It's all about the voidable years, Brendan.
John Schneider thinking, I'll be dead by the time those cap hits get there. I don't care.
That's right. That's for the next owner.
But yeah, thank you everybody for coming out here. It's been a great off season. It's been a fun off season. Things are happening in ways that they usually don't happen around here for the last decade and a half. And we are here to cover every bit of it. We're here to follow every bit of it. And we are going to be as prepared as possible for everything that happens this off season. So let's hit it. Let's get out of here. I will be seeing you guys soon. I will be seeing you guys tomorrow. And we will be seeing you guys next week. So again, thank you, Brandon. And as always, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.